Lots of morning headlines. Lots and lots and lots over a tremendously busy weekend. Let's get to them. First and foremost, Mariners. That's how many wins they got this weekend. That's what we asked for, Slickhawk. No, that's what we demanded.
Well, that's what we need.
We demanded. Before I left the air here on Friday morning at 10 o'clock, I said, Mariners, I've been very lenient with you all year. I have always just accepted 2 out of 3. I have always accepted 2 out of 4. I have been very lenient all year. But I said, not this weekend. 2 out of 3 against the Oakland A's ain't going to cut it. You need to go. And that's exactly what they did. 10-2 yesterday to sweep the series. They get back to only 2.5 games out of the wild card. Robbie Cano, 4 for 5 with a home run, 4 RBIs. How about Andrew Albers? Have we found something here? Or is this just flash in the pan?
I don't know.
With Andrew Albers.
I don't know. Yesterday was nice.
6 innings, 1 run. He improves to 3-1 on the season with an ERA in the 3s. It's been a long time since we've seen a Mariner starter with an ERA in the 3s. UCLA rallies from 44-10 down to beat Texas A&M, 45-44. They become the first team in over a decade in college football to overcome a 34-plus deficit to win a football game. Number 1, Alabama pulls away from third-ranked Florida State on Saturday night, and in the process, quarterback DeAndre Francois suffered a season-ending injury for the Noles, patellar tendon. Bad news for Florida State because you figured, well, even though they lost to Alabama, they're still very much in the national championship hunt, still very much in the Final Four hunt, but probably not going to happen now without their starting quarterback, which is a shame to say after one game. Dogs pull away in the second half for a 30-14 win at Rutgers. Hugh will break that down over the next 4 hours. Dante Pettis ties a Pac-12 career record with his 6th punt return touchdown. That was the play of the game, and not only the play of the game, just the play that kind of ignited the Dogs and got them going, got them looking like the Huskies from that point forward. Chris Peterson on the win passed Jimbo Fisher into second place behind Urban Meyer in career winning percentage. Hawks trading Jermaine Kearse, a 2nd and a 7th in 2018 to the Jets for defensive tackle Sheldon Richardson, a 7th rounder. We'll talk a lot about that, not only with you. We'll get Slick's take. We'll get Greg Bell's take. We'll get Mike Holmgren's take. Patriots have traded cornerback Justin Coleman to the Seahawks for a 7th rounder. Hawks trading away Tremaine Brock to the Vikings for a 7th rounder. There's going to be a test on this at the end of the show.
It's a lot to remember.
I hope everybody's got this. They also trade a 7th rounder to the Chiefs for offensive lineman Isaiah Battle. And the cuts have come in, and some surprises. Our boy Rubes got axed.
Yeah.
That surprised me a little bit. Not as much with the Sheldon Richardson move. But Cason Williams, that was the surprise of all surprises, that Cason Williams did not make it. He has ended up on the Cleveland Browns active roster. You knew he was going to end up on somebody's active roster if Seattle cut him. I'm anxious to get Greg Bell's and Hughes' take on that. Alex Collins, Trevon Boykin, also axed by the Seahawks. Dolphins reaching a 4-year, $24 million extension with safety T.J. McDonald, including $10 million in guarantees. Let's get rolling.
Mitch in the morning on your home for the 12th man in the NFL. Seattle Sports Radio 950, KJR.
A happy Labor Day to you. If you're listening right now, I would assume there's a very good chance that you do have to labor today. Because if you didn't have to labor today, I mean, why would you be up? Like maybe folks that are early risers normally, like going out for that morning cup of coffee or the morning jog or something like that, where they don't have to work. But I'm thinking 95+% of everybody that is listening to our voices right now is doing so because they have to labor alongside us today. So,
yes, we're all quite laborious.
So
today.
we appreciate your hard work and your bosses bringing you in on a Labor Day Monday. But a lot to get to today. Montage coming up in 25 minutes. Greg Bell, Seahawks at 7. A lot to get to with Greg Bell. This may set our all-time record for length of interview with Greg Bell, just because I've got 10 things on my list for Greg Bell right now, and we may not even get through all of them. We might have to postpone some of them too. Usually we keep Greg on for about 8 to 10 minutes, but today might have to be a little bit longer. The Schnods at 7:30. Lots going on in the world of the NFL. Also, I think maybe we could go to, if you could find Florida State for that Francois injury. That was a huge, huge injury over the weekend in college football. Maybe Texas A&M might be a good place to, or UCLA might be a good place to go after that comeback by the Bruins yesterday. We'll have our texting poll today. I've got a poll question for you, Slickhawk, unless you've got one for me. And we haven't spoken since I got home late last night from Canada. So unless you've got a poll question, I've got one for you. Are we doing a poll question?
No, we're done.
Okay,
That's done.
Well,
That's training camp.
Then I'm gonna give this to Hugh. Then we'll do it at 7:45 and we'll get his take on it. Hugh's got something to say at 8, and we debut our fact or fiction today at 8:30.
Could be either or. Could it be fact? Could be fiction.
That's going to be our big contest between the morning show and Dave Softy Mahler's show. That'll come up at 8:30 today, and Mike Holmgren at 9 o'clock with our great debate in the 9:30 segment. So a lot to get to today as we are joined by Hugh Breedlove Millen. I'm going to thank you as well, like I thanked everybody else just a moment ago. Thank you for laboring today, Hugh.
It's all good,
Thank
man.
you for laboring.
This is a labor of love, right? I mean,
well, yeah, absolutely.
This guy's shoveling asphalt out there, and so, coming in to talk a little ball.
And a lot of
not so heavy lifting,
and a lot of ball to talk about as well over the weekend. Let's just start with the most recent. I got it was a bizarre weekend for me sports wise, because it was one where I was in, and I'm sure everybody has taken these trips, whether it be camping or whether it be what have you, where you're kind of out of the world of internet, you're out of the world of TV. We were up on the coast of Vancouver Island. There was no TV.
Yeah.
There was very little internet reception up there. Very, very sketchy. So pretty much I had to spend, thank my wife for driving the last 3 hours of the trip last night, because, I spent basically ever since we got to the border all the way home, man, I was on my computer. I was catching up with everything that was going on. I had 2 days worth of tweets to scroll through and find out, I'd heard bits and pieces. Obviously I knew that the Huskies had won, but I'd only listened to, I watched scattered bits of it at the BC Ferry Terminal at from about 5:30 to 6:15 on Friday night, and then I had to watch the rest last night on my phone from Blaine to home yesterday. So,
right.
It was, but I did get I got it all in. It was in pieces, but I got it all in. I definitely do want to sit back and watch the rest of it, and sit back and watch it for real, because I recorded it at home. But last night, man, your boy Jimmy Mora must have been shaking his head as the clock turned to the fourth quarter, going, what in the world is happening to my football team? Because that was supposed to be a close game. Well, it ended up as a close game with Texas A&M, but not the way that everybody thought it was.
Well, it was stunning, absolutely breathtaking to actually believe that something like that could transpire. And I think when you have a historic upset, now this is 34 points, the all-time college football record is 35, so I'm certain it set Pac-10 and certainly UCLA records and what have you. So when you talk about historic, it really was historic. But when you have that type of just epic, prodigious comeback, you're really talking about a couple of factors during the course of the game. Number one, you just say, okay, the math of it. How far is the deficit and how much time do we have? So forgetting what's transpiring on the field, there's at some point you just say, well, there's too little time, right? But beyond that, there's the what you might term irreversible trends. What's the state of the game? If you didn't see that game, to try and comprehend the level that Texas A&M dominated the first half, it's almost indescribable. I mean, they literally were running UCLA out of the I was going to say out of the stadium.
Out of the gym, man.
Running them out of the conference. They were running at will. They were harassing Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen was getting hammered. It was one of those typical games we've all seen. It just looked like too much men against too much boys. UCLA last year had a real struggle running the football. They changed offensive coordinator. They got Jed Fish, who had spent a brief time here with the Seahawks, but he brought a pro-style system from Michigan, and this is now Josh Rosen's third system in 3 years. And so, there's always some adjustments going on there. But, in the first half, they just couldn't run the ball. They couldn't do anything. And to see what they were able to do.
38-10 at halftime.
Yeah.
It was 17-3 at the end of one, 38-10 at the end of two. And still at that point, you're like, okay, 38-10.
But it felt like 58-10.
Okay.
It was just, I don't know what the stats were in terms of yards and
right.
And I know it was a lot to a little. It just felt like just utter domination. And as I said, UCLA couldn't.
But then they put two more field goals on the board with 9:57 left in the third and 4:08 left in the third. So at the 4:08 mark, it's now 44-10. So there was no sign of instantaneous comeback for UCLA in the beginning of the second half.
And for a fan who says, you know what, I'm just going to watch regular football. I'm not going to watch the preseason and what have you. The last football game you really remember from the 2016 season was a Super Bowl. And the comeback that Tom Brady and the Patriots engineered. Yeah. And then if you're a guy who just said, well, hey, I'll check in, Labor Day weekend, first real official weekend of college football. Man alive, you've seen in two quote-unquote back-to-back weekends, you've seen comebacks like you're scarcely ever going to see.
Well, two back-to-back weekends.
I don't care how old you are. You might not ever see a comeback like what happened yesterday in the Rose Bowl.
99.5%. That was at least the computers.
90 what?
99.5% was, 99.7 with first and 10 at the UCLA 22-yard line with 6:04 left to go in the ball game. Texas A&M had a 99.7%
Well,
chance.
I'm sure that if you take all the times where the score has been that, comebacks happen a lot less than 3 out of 1,000. So whatever they're using to calculate that may be some type of matrix.
Right. It's an algorithm that they put together, and on probability of all these things happening.
It's a computer programmer that just kind of decides, well, this is, I'll attach this to that. But just in terms of history, there's no way that you've seen,
the way that you see 3 out of 1,000.
3 out of
1,000.
A million, so.
Absolutely unbelievable. But good for good for the Pac-12. I am a guy, I know, Softy is, I'm sure, debated with you many, many times about this topic, but the topic of if you're a Husky fan, if you're a Cougar fan, do you root for the Pac-12 in non-conference games? Do you root for the Pac? And I am a guy that save Oregon. Oregon is in its own little bucket over here. I cannot find myself.
Which bucket is that?
The bucket of my love for the Pac-12.
The same bucket that Beethoven used to piss in.
Ow.
Today's a holiday.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just ease into the week. Let's just kind of ease into things.
Slickhawk, I got to tell you, you asked the question. You stepped in and asked the question.
I stepped in the bucket.
Hugh simply gave you his response.
Image
so
sits in the corner.
You didn't have to ask the question. You could have sat there nice and quiet and let us have a discussion for UCLA about the UCLA game and Pac-12, but you decided to interject. So Hugh decided to volley it back.
Autzen Stadium, a record 77-point score this week. I just want to let you know.
That's good. That's good. Good for them. Good for your boy Willie Taggart.
Yeah.
But they're in the different bucket. We'll call it Beethoven's bucket.
Yeah.
And but the rest of the Pac-12, USC plays Notre Dame, and the traditional, Stanford plays Notre Dame. Yeah. All these big non-conference games that the conference plays. I find myself every single year rooting for the Pac-12, and more so now where there is a definitive reason at the end of the season why you need the Pac-12 to be good, and it's the same reason that you have in basketball. In basketball, it's everything. In basketball, it's everything. It is your conference's reputation once conference season begins determines whether 11-7 makes the NCAA tournament in your conference, or if you need to go 13-3, or the year that the Huskies didn't make the NCAA tournament where they went 14-4 because the conference's reputation was squat. It's the same in football now, to a lesser extent because there's only 4 teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I probably lie somewhere between you and Softy, closer to you than to Dave. I do think early on, for example, USC was kind of against the ropes for a while. And I don't think you really, in watching that game, had the sense that Western Michigan was going to actually win in the Coliseum. But, Appalachian State won in the big house of Michigan. I mean, it does happen.
You're talking USC, right?
I think USC.
You said UCLA, I think you just said on accident. I believe. Yeah, at least that's what I heard. But, no, Western Michigan, USC. Yeah. Okay. And they were in trouble a little bit for a while.
Yeah, Western Michigan had USC on the ropes in the Coliseum. And, you're not really taking it serious. But a loss like that would not have been good for the I mean, I don't know. From my perspective, it's all central to how it reflects on the Huskies. I'll admit that. But I think where I might disagree a little bit with Dave is that I do think that it's going to reflect on the Huskies because, if the conference is viewed to be that feeble, then you're the king of Poop Island, and yes. And I don't know, at some point, particularly in a year where, again, Washington's schedule is going to be questioned. Now, Rutgers at a time, and I'd have to look, when Greg Schiano was there, it looked like Rutgers might be on the incline. They are a Big Ten team. But at the end of the day, Washington's going to get hammered for their out-of-conference schedule. We know it. They're playing Montana this Saturday,
It is what it is.
Whatever.
For one more year. For this year, it is what it is, and then it
Fresno State is, that's a little bit of an upgrade, obviously, from Montana.
But they're going to need to. Your point is, they're going to need to play top 25 teams, multiple top 25 teams in the regular season.
Well, based on how Washington played on Friday, it seems putting about 6 carts before the horse. But if you could accept the premise that Washington's going to kind of get iron some things out and play better in the conference, you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to rely on your performance in the conference. And if the Pac-12 is really down, it's not going to help. I mean, Oregon State goes to Colorado State and just gets hammered
in the second half, shellacked.
I don't know how. I mean, I guess you could just say from a recruiting standpoint, if everybody else is down, you're gonna beat some of these schools for recruits. But at any rate, undebatedly a great victory yesterday for UCLA in the conference, and I'm still stunned. I'm still stunned. When you think of, this was like Buffalo Bills and the Houston Oilers.
That was 31 points. Was that 30?
I thought it was
34-3, something like that. When it
35-3, I thought.
35-3, 32 points. So that's exactly what it was. I mean, it was much greater than the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl's 25, 28-3, right?
Yeah.
Super Bowl's 25 points. This is almost another. This is over another touchdown. That's incredible.
And easier in college with the clock.
And
running more plays in college football.
And the clock stops. Yeah. On a first down. But when Rosen ran to his left and kind of heaved that thing up, and I think he was throwing to the other guy. I think he was throwing to the inside receiver, but the outside receiver, it was just kind of, that was kind of a flyers up. There's 2 A&M players. There's 2 UCLA guys, and Rosen, for those who didn't see it, as a right-handed quarterback, he gets flushed to his left. He's got okay athleticism, but that's far from his forte, and he somehow throws while running to his left. He kind of heaves it up into a mosh pit, and a kid made a great play coming back to it to get the touchdown. At that point, you kind of feel like, wow, this is.
Was that the turning point? What
I don't know about the turning point because. Because
everybody remembers the turning point in the Patriots-Falcons game. I mean, everybody will remember that. The sack, the strip sack, fumble. I mean, to that point, you were sitting there going, I don't care what the score is.
Yeah.
The Patriots are going to come back and win this game. At least that's what I was thinking as soon as I saw that strip sack. And the thing with this one, since I was not watching this one, I could not watch this one. I was busy watching the Husky game on my phone in driving through Mount Vernon.
Oh.
No. So was there a play? Was there a particular moment where you were like, holy crap, this is going to happen?
Well, it might have been the last one. They were down by 2 scores still at this point, and there was about 3 minutes to go, and there had been a post that had gone through a A&M safety's hands and could have been intercepted. The A&M safety kind of reached high and went through his hands, and then a UCLA receiver caught it about the 4 and walked into the end zone. So you're starting to feel some crazy energy. But at the juncture I'm describing, you're still down 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And while UCLA gets the ball, you know how this goes. When you're down 2 touchdowns and there's 5, 4, 3, 2 minutes in that area, there's obviously a primacy on scoring. But then the question is, with how much time are you going to score? Because if you chew too much
with
time,
12 seconds left,
you
it's
have
not
to
going
kick
to
an
matter.
onside. Well, or even under a minute 10 or something, you're going to have to kick an onside. If you score that touchdown with a minute 15 to go,
you're not kicking it deep. Yeah.
So you're sitting there saying you got to score, but you got to score now. And so Rosen gets flushed to his left, and he just kind of throws this out there. And boy, oh boy, I'm certain he was throwing to the other guy. I could be wrong, but it looked like he was throwing to another. So now they get that, and you're down a touchdown, and A&M was so certain they were going to kick. There was enough time that they didn't even have their hands team on there. They were in a regular 5 guys up, regular kickoff return formation. So credit UCLA for having, managed the clock well enough to get that score early enough that they could kick, then play defense, and they forced the 3 and out. They got a sack on 3rd down, and then Rosen, he comes. They got ample time.
So at that point, you had to figure, man, they've got at this point it's better than 50-50. They marched down and scored.
There was so much
with the momentum. That they had.
It was so historic. I'm trying to remember if they ever had to convert on a 4th down. Something tells me I think they did. I don't know if you could.
Yeah, I could look it up.
If you could look
at
it
right here.
The play, but they may have had to convert a 4th down. I know this. Drive. They had to withstand. They get a touchdown pass, and twice on the drive. Listen to this. Twice on the drive.
This is the last scoring drive for UCLA?
The last scoring drive, they get 3 5-yard penalties. They get a delay of game, and they get 2 false starts where Rosen doesn't allow them to get set up.
Right.
And like as a quarterback, you got to let the offense set for a second, and he gets so excited, and they end up taking 3 penalties on the drive.
He has a 3rd down conversion that he completes for 6 to the Texas A&M 46. He has a 3rd and 1 with the false start, as you mentioned, makes it 3rd and 6, incomplete. Then there's a 4th and 6.
Yeah, he hit the swing route off to his left.
At the 20, okay, for 10 yards, and then the touchdown. And was that the fake spike touchdown?
Yeah.
The old Dan Marino, huh?
Goes Dan Marino on him. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, I know there's a lot of local stuff to talk about.
No, yeah, and I want to.
But
that's historic. I mean, that's a historic
it's a
football
conference game.
Yeah.
It's a former Seahawks coach. And 2 coaches kind of a little bit embattled, if you read the reports.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how Kevin Sumlin, I don't know how he survives this.
Brutal.
I can recall, I guess the statute of limitations allows me to tell the story, but going into the 2008 season, there was a lot of concern about the direction the Husky program was going with Tyrone Willingham and Scott Woodward, and I'll bring him up because he is now the A&M athletic director. And I remember talking to Scott Woodward, and we were just kind of discussing in the opening game of the 2008 season. Washington lost at Oregon in the opener and looked pretty bad doing it. Mm-hmm. And at some point, we're kind of discussing how the game was going and how it went. I was talking with Scott Woodward, and he goes, yeah, well, he's a effing moron. That's why he's getting effing fired.
About Willingham.
About Tyrone Willingham. Yep.
And he lasted another 7 or 8 games. Because he got fired right before the USC game, right?
Uh-huh.
He got fired before the USC game.
Yeah, I mean, it just, it's one of those deals where you're on thin ice, and you come in and you have an opening game like that, and so I wonder if Kevin Sumlin has
going to get the whack by Scott Woodward. We'll see. 6:26 on 950 KJR. We got a lot for Hugh to get to. Husky related, Seahawk related, lots of news over this weekend. That's why we're here on a Labor Day, because there's so much going on the weekend. We couldn't take a holiday today. We got the morning montage coming up. Greg Bell with Seahawks at 7 o'clock today. Schnozzes. Hugh's got something to say at 8 o'clock. A lot to get to. Mike Holmgren. From the Carter Volkswagen Studio, Dick Fain, Hugh Breedlove Millen, Slick Hawk in the house, Niner Nate. Time for our morning montage. Let's start with the biggest plays from the Husky game on Friday night.
Takes the snap. He is a left-footed kicker and gets a booming kick away. Pettis in retreat, fields over the shoulder, bobbles at his own 40, picks it up on the run back 45 to the 50 to midfield of far side 40, 30. Dante Pettis needs a block at the 20 to the 10, 5, touchdown Washington. Fire up the Inferno. Dante Pettis, 6th punt return touchdown as a Husky, adding to his school record. At the Rutgers 7-yard line, Browning set. Dropping to pass, 5-man rush, looks at Coleman, right corner alone to the end zone, touchdown Washington. Pass reception touchdown for tailback Lavon Coleman. 1st and 10 from the 18, Jake the pass, fires for the corner of the end zone for Gaskin, reaching back, trying to make the catch, got it! Myles Gaskin, 2nd catch of the night, and this one goes for 6.
That's the legend. Our thanks to Bob Rondo, IMG, for providing the call. Dante Pettis, shot out of a frickin' cannon, Hugh. I mean, that was a beautiful thing to behold. Not only the vision, but the blocking that he received on that punt return, and it really ignited the Dogs, and they played completely differently from that point forward, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, he's got a great gift, and I think you mentioned the best part about it is the vision. Of course, he's got to have the skill set to go where his eyes tell him to go and make something happen. But just that knack for cutting back. They showed the end zone copy, and it wasn't, in my mind, overtly obvious that was the place to go. Mm-hmm. But he just had a great feel for the timing and where to hit the space. So yeah, he's obviously got a gift, and he's going to go down as Washington's greatest punt returner. So hopefully he's got a couple more in him.
We'll talk more about that Dogs game later on. The Mariners get the sweep over Oakland.
And it gets thrown. It's a dart. Here comes Segura. Mariners win it. 7-6 Seattle. Segura paying attention. Ball got through the legs of Maxwell. He scores easily. And the Mariners have taken game 2 of this series and pick up ground on Texas, Tampa Bay, and Baltimore.
A sweep is as lucky can be.
I think it's time to sing. It is time to sing. They have gotten themselves right back in it. They've taken that big old magnet and pulled themselves back over 500.
And it's no day never no more. Will I
let's take a look at the wild card standings real quick here. Mariners at 2.5 back. They are looking up at the New York Yankees, who are at 73 and 63. They are looking up at the Minnesota Twins, who are 71 and 65. Those are your two in if the season ended today, which it doesn't. It's stupid to even talk about. The LA Angels and Baltimore Orioles are one game ahead of the Mariners at 70 and 67, and then the M's are right there, and they've got the Houston Astros coming into town in this homestand that we requested, Slickhawk. I believe we requested, nay, we demanded 7-2.
Well, we need 7-2.
Well, all that means
look.
is 2-1, and if my math serves me, 2 out of 3, and 2 out of 3 gets you 7-2 for the homestand.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Now, the biggest and possibly most difficult series of the year is upcoming this next 3 days, when you've got Dallas Keuchel, the newly acquired Justin Verlander, and the now healthy Lance McCullers coming in. And they're going to be facing, what is it? I think Erasmo Ramirez.
Yes, Ariel Miranda.
And probably the Ocho.
Mike Leake.
Oh,
no,
is it
Mike Leake? Yeah. 2 out of 3.
Let's see where we're at after Houston.
That's going to be a tall order. We'll see if they can. We'll see if they can do it.
If you get 1, you got to sweep the Angels. If you get 2, you just simply have to win the Angels series.
Angels series. All right, back to NCAA football. Here's the game that Hugh broke down for us last segment.
Rosen throws back pylon. Caught. Touchdown. Jordan Lashley holding it over the shoulder, and the comeback is complete. It was 44-10, and now it's 44-44 with 43 seconds remaining, and the extra point, if it's good, will give the Bruins the lead.
I told them at halftime, I said, let's not look at the scoreboard. Let's just play football, one play at a time. And they did that, and it worked out. So
I thought our guys kept playing down the end. They made more plays than we did in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter.
What are they talking about in College Station today? Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Sports radio in College Station, Texas this week is not going to be kind to old Kevin Sumlin, that's for sure.
And they're only about 90 minutes outside of Houston. I mean, you talk about...
There's a lot of Aggie fans down there.
Tough times for them.
Epic comeback for UCLA.
And by the way, I know that wasn't a Gus Johnson tape, but he is awesome at upsets. And, to capture the enormity of a situation, I love Gus Johnson. So great job, FS1, on the call by them.
Yep,
they did a nice job.
Western Michigan ties USC late with a kickoff return.
Here's the kick, end over end and deep, and Darius takes it at the 2. He's coming out. He's to the 5, to the 10, 15, up the middle to the 20. Darius cuts it outside to the right, cuts it back inside. He's to midfield. He's to the 40. He may go to the 30, to the 20, 15. High steps 1 to the 10, 5. Touchdown, Western Michigan. Darius Phillips, 101 yards to the house.
Maybe people were thinking Appalachian State, Michigan at that point in the game.
God, I was hoping.
28-28, but then USC pulls away with this pick six.
Incomplete, intercepted Marvell Tell. Here he goes at the 30. Outside, he's got a line of blockers at the 20. He will score. Touchdown, Marvell Tell. Touchdown, USC.
How much of that game did you watch, the USC game?
Most of it. I had the tuner on the TiVo, kind of. You can pause and watch a couple games.
Cool.
And then while you pause, you go watch 20 minutes, and then you come back, and you're right at the same spot.
Right.
Oh, TiVo, yeah. TiVo's really cool that way. They got, 6 different tuners, so you can watch a lot of games. So, yeah, I watched certainly more than half of that game.
More to criticize
the second half.
More to criticize USC for their performance against Western Michigan, or more to criticize the Huskies for their performance against Rutgers?
Ooh.
Just briefly, we'll have a long time to talk about the Huskies
USC was
later.
at home and a lesser conference, so I'd probably go with USC. That was a little bit more.
Lesser conference? Was it a lesser team? Who knows? I mean, it was a team that was in a BCS Bowl last year, but they lost
I think Rutgers doesn't appear to be a good football team. They won 2 games last year, but I think that they are a better team. Their big guys are better than their fast guys. They have no team speed. Everywhere. They look great when they break the huddle. They look great coming off the bus. They look good on the hoof. They're fast guys, but when they start running, they don't look good. But I think the beef inside, it's a Big Ten team with a giant facilities upgrade where they really overhauled their weight room, and I think there's a mentality there that it has to get done in the weight room. So at least by my eye, I thought their interior guys on both sides of the ball were better football players than their perimeter guys on both sides of the ball.
Big loss for a top-ranked team. Florida State loses their quarterback.
Blitz coming. Francois rolling. He's going to be sacked and dropped at the 24-yard line. They send a safety blitzer, and Francois could not outrun him. And he's hurt. Ronnie Harrison on a blitz. Quarterback DeAndre Francois never saw him coming. He is grabbed by the legs and came down hard on that left leg. Don't know.
Please reset the game clock. 5:44.
But DeAndre Francois looks like he's got a leg injury of some kind. He went down hard, sacked from behind. 3rd sack of the game.
I mean, that is just one of the worst things that any sports team can go through, is not only to have your star quarterback injured, but to have your star quarterback injured in the first game of the season before you even have a feeling with how the season's going to go. It's one thing to lose your star quarterback if you're, 5-4 in a college football season. You're like, okay, well, maybe we don't have great aspirations to win any championships or anything like that. But for a team like Florida State, who all they had to do was win the games that they were favored in the rest of the way, because they were going to be favored in all of them, and they would have finished 11-1. They would have gone to their conference championship game. If they would have won that game, they would have gone to the Final Four, and that game against Alabama would have been in the distant past. And instead, it's going to affect their whole season.
Well, they take a sack in a situation. You talked about 99.7% chance. I'm sure the probability of winning at that juncture of the game, given the score, and there's only a few minutes left. To have your starting quarterback go down there. And I'm just imagining Jimbo Fisher walking down the hall to his AD's office, walking in, closing the door, and saying, now, remind me again why we didn't play East Carolina on Saturday?
That's right.
I mean, look, I love it that they did it. I'll go so far as to say I think that college football should on some level mandate and intervene in the scheduling. So that everybody's playing an equal playing field. So I think games like that are absolutely necessary. Well, they're not necessary, but I think for the state of the game, in every way, those games should be incentivized for both parties. So I think the committee is working towards that. But given the state now where you have other teams that are just taking on easy schedules, boy, oh boy, if you're Florida State, you're wondering why you wanted to lock horns with Alabama.
The Orioles do a little tromboning.
And Trumbo pulls it up that left side, way back in the corner. Pierce on the run. He dives. He cannot get to it. That's the ball game. Here comes Scope. He scores. Trumbo wins it in the bottom of the 12th inning.
12th inning, they get past the Blue Jays 5-4, and Baltimore stays ahead of the Mariners by a game with that win. Next, please.
Springer. It's a high shot to left field over the tracks. That's number 31.
George Springer for the Houston Astros. We will see Springer at Safeco Field today, which means one thing and one thing only. When we see George Springer, that means a leadoff home run in the top of the first, which seems to happen every single time George Springer comes to Seattle. Leadoff home run in the top of the first. Let's just chalk it up. Now, when you have the combination slick of Springer
and Miranda.
Well, I was going to say Gallardo, because who gives up a leadoff home run to start a game more than Giovanni Gallardo?
Probably Miranda, who's given up more home runs than anybody.
He has. I just don't remember Miranda's coming as the first batter, though. He's like Gallardo steps up, it seems like, every start It's 1-0 after the first batter.
I think if you stepped up there on the mound at Safeco Field and threw to George Springer, I think you would probably have less of a chance of giving up a home run than Ariel Miranda.
Maybe, yeah. He's been giving up a lot of bombs, more than anybody in baseball. 6:44 at 9:50 KJR. We'll get some Hugh takes on the Dogs. We've got Greg Bell coming up the top of the hour as well. Mike Holmgren at 9 o'clock. All we're laboring on a Labor Day here on 950 KJR. 6:50 on 950 KJR. Just to wrap up our conversation here, Hugh, on the epic comeback last night. I received an email. Thanks to listener James for sending this in. This is a Facebook post, Hugh, from Board of Regents member Tony Busby. He is a noted Houston attorney and a Board of Regents member from Texas A&M. We were talking about the heat that Kevin Sumlin would be in after that loss yesterday. We were talking about that a few minutes ago. This is Tony Busby on his Facebook page. I'm sure I may be criticized for this post, but I honestly don't care. I've been on the Board of Regents of the A&M system for almost 7 years. During that time, I've not once commented on Kevin Sumlin and his performance during his tenure at our school. I never said a word when he and his agent manipulated a much bigger and longer contract. I said nothing about his arrogance and his mishandling of multiple player controversies. I said nothing when we had multiple awesome recruiting classes only to see key players leave our school or underperform. But tonight, I am very disappointed, and I have to say this. Kevin Sumlin was outcoached, which isn't new. He recruits well, but can't coach the big games or the close games. Our players were better tonight. Our players were more talented tonight. But our coaches were dominated on national TV yet again. I'm only one vote on the Board of Regents, but when the time comes to my vote, it will be that Kevin Sumlin needs to go. We owe it to our school and our players. We can do better.
Well, I think that's entirely inappropriate. I mean, if you're asking, are we joking and cutting up with this, or are we serious?
Well, no. I mean, it's just that's a major Division I university who just played a huge football game last night, and a Board of Regents member posts that. I mean, that's unusual.
Well, yeah, it's unusual, and the reason I say it's inappropriate, what happens if they win the rest of their games? What's he going to say then?
Right.
You know, put it this way, you got to support him until you don't. And right now, for those players to hear that, that's not helping the cause. If the guy is, if he's a Board of Regent at the university, then I'm assuming he was deemed to have the qualifications to have the best interests of the university in mind. Well, when he does that, and the players are reading that, do you think he made it easier for Texas A&M to win games or lose them games? Now, those games. Now, maybe he'll tell you in a quiet moment, well, I want Kevin Sumlin to get fired. And so I'm willing to tank this season so that he can get fired. Okay, well, if that's his logic.
Yeah, I mean, it's plastered all over CBSSports.com right now. The title is One Texas A&M Regent Already Cast His Vote to Fire Kevin Sumlin.
Yeah, and you know, what's the old saying? Look, you get hopped up on emotion, and you just think twice before you press send, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just give it a little time to marinate. But I don't know. I think that's right. Look, I was rooting for UCLA for a few reasons. I'm with you. I think the conference needs to win games like this, and it was an epic game. You know, it's literally one for the ages and what have you. But I don't see how that's appropriate for a member of a Board of Regents.
I'd love to go there, Slick. I know it's late notice, but if we need another story,
we're gonna go to College Station, Texas.
Oh, that's a good place to go to the Schnoz today at 7:30. We'll go there for the Schnoz. We'll find out a little bit about Sheldon Richardson as well. Seahawks at 7 coming up next with Greg Bell. A lot of Seahawks news to get to, probably more than we have for just one segment with Greg. So we're probably gonna have to sprinkle out these over a course of 2 or 3 Seahawks at 7s this week. Daily Schnoz at 7:30. We got to get Hugh's take. A lot of Husky football to talk about today between now and 10 o'clock today. Mike Holmgren at 9 o'clock. Great debate as well. All coming up on the show on 950 KJ. What's going on out there? Hugh Millen is laboring. Slickhawk is laboring. Niner Nate is laboring. I'm laboring. And Greg Bell is laboring as well on Labor Day, and we will chat with him about the Seattle Seahawks and the busy, busy weekend for the Seahawks with all the cuts and the trades. Let's kind of wrap them up, put them in a nice little container for you. If you were like I was, and that's like out of the country, I actually was out of the country this weekend, and you didn't know what was going on, well, the Seattle Seahawks have traded Jermaine Kearse along with a second-round draft pick and a seventh-round draft pick to the Jets for defensive tackle Sheldon Richardson and a seventh-rounder. They have also traded a seventh-round pick to the Patriots for cornerback Justin Coleman. They have also traded Tremaine Brock to the Vikings for a seventh-rounder. They've also traded, there's a lot of seventh-rounders around here. They've also traded a seventh-rounder to the Chiefs for offensive lineman Isaiah Battle. Their cuts include Atiba Rubin, Kaysen Williams, Alex Collins, Trevon Boykin. The Browns subsequently wrapped up Kaysen Williams in a nice little bow and sent him to Cleveland. Dolphins have reached a 4-year, $24 million extension with safety T.J. McDonald, $10 million in guarantees. Patriots trade quarterback Jacoby Brissett to the Colts for Philip Dorsett, and the Colts also activating Andrew Luck from the PUP list. Let's chat with our friend Greg Bell from the Tacoma News-Tribune, shall we? Let's do it. Thanks for laboring today with us, Greg Bell.
Yeah, Labor Day means work day in the NFL.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. My goodness, Greg, I have got a long list of questions for you that I don't know if we're going to get done in this segment. So this might be 2 or 3 days worth of questions for you just to get through what happened this weekend. All right, but let's start with Sheldon Richardson. Boy, I know it sounds when you talk to people in the know on the national level, and probably you as well at the local level, probably smelled this coming maybe for a while. Talk about how this all began and how long has it been that you kind of heard rumblings about that big defensive lineman coming to Seattle?
Well, I guess it was last week or a couple weeks ago that Richardson was reported to have said that the Seahawks were interested in trading for him and that they wanted him to take a pay cut, which he didn't want to do at this point in his career. He's in his late 20s, has been to a Pro Bowl, wants a big second contract or contract to get him into his 30s, and so he didn't do it. He didn't want to take a pay cut. So the Seahawks went and found money themselves, and they asked Doug Baldwin to restructure his contract to turn salary money into signing bonus money, which is still cash to him, but for the Seahawks it allowed him to save $5.2 million against its cap for this year, and that's the money it used to acquire Sheldon Richardson. The Seahawks rarely do this, go to one of their veterans and ask to renegotiate in the season they're in, and that as soon as I saw that it was right after I talked to you on Friday morning, I saw that was happening. That's when I knew that they were acquiring someone. And I wondered, okay, who's out there that's most likely to acquire? And Sheldon Richardson is the name we've been hearing from before that. So, it's definitely a go-for-it move. Let's go win it right now type of move. $8 million salary cap hit. In fact, he's going to be a free agent after this year. It's not about, well, maybe we can get him for next year and a follow-on contract. Maybe they can, but it's all about right now. And now I think they have the most formidable defensive line and defensive front in football, counting the linebackers. But as you mentioned, it's a win-now move, but it doesn't hurt you financially down the road. No, thanks to Baldwin giving money back to him. Right. They were only committed to him for this year for $8 million, and with Baldwin's deal, they really only used almost through at $2.8 million, more like $3 million of their own salary cap that they didn't have before Baldwin renegotiated. Does this happen if Malik McDowell isn't hurt? I don't think so. Maybe not, but Richardson is much like McDowell would have been, and he plays defensive tackle and end. It was not quite a 50-50 split with the Jets. It was more like 60% tackle, 40% end last season in snaps. But he can do both. He can rush outside. He can rush inside. He can be an every down guy. He can be a 3-technique tackle. He can rush outside, pass rush. This guy who had 8 sacks a couple years ago when he went to the Pro Bowl, NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2013. McDowell was going to be that as well. And now they can pair Bennett and Richardson if they want as an inside-outside guy. And they've been so successful moving Bennett from end on a run down to tackle, overwhelming slower guards and centers on passing downs. And that versatility in moving up and down the line to find mismatches is what Richardson has done with the Jets.
Greg Bell joining us, Seahawks at 7. He does it this time every day. Now, obviously, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this move. I think there's a lot of reasons to be a little bit skeptical about this move as well, and one of them is just kind of what I alluded to with Malik McDowell getting hurt. So basically, you lost your first-round draft pick this year to a stupid ATV accident, and it also caused you to sacrifice a second-round draft pick as well by bringing in another defensive tackle to replace him, right?
Right, and I think indirectly that's why Amara Darbo's on the team. And they didn't want to lose their third-round draft pick on top of it. Philosophically, they will have lost potentially 3 draft picks from this draft already, only a couple months after the draft ended. The second round, for the Jets' point of view, the second-round pick is much bigger, obviously, than Kason Williams, although the Williams thing was still baffling to me. It's the second-round pick that was the chip that the Jets really wanted.
Curse, right?
I mean, I'm sorry, Curse.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Kason's that's on my list too, Greg. We'll get there.
I've been writing so much about Kason Williams the last 48 hours that yes, thank you, Dick. Curse is a good piece for them, but it was the second-round pick that the Jets, they're a rebuilding team. They're trying to restart over again, new general manager in the last couple of years, new coaching staff. Todd Bowles from Arizona. They're trying to start over, and if you're trying to rebuild, you get a second-round pick, even if it's at the bottom of the second round if the Seahawks go to the playoffs again this year. That was the impetus for the Jets to make this move. And then when Richardson didn't have to make any salary adjustments for the year, that's what made it work. But, yeah, the Jermaine Kearse situation, it became apparent in Oakland when we talked to him that he knew he was on his way out. And it was one of those where there's smoke, there's fire type of deals. And we talked about that on Friday. Again, hats off to him for what he's done here. But the Seahawks went for a win move now and massively upgraded their defensive tackle for it.
But in the process, they also had to get rid of some guys. I mean, they had to get rid of Reuben. They traded Cassius Marsh for a 5th and a 7th. So let's talk about those guys. I mean, how much better is that line actually with Sheldon Richardson, but losing guys like Reuben and Cassius Marsh, who are pretty productive players for you?
Well, both of those guys, Reuben and Marsh, were in the last years of their deal.
Right.
Reuben's 31 years old, costing a couple $1 million. Marsh has been a special teams player primarily, although he had showed on the defensive line as well. But he was in the last year of his rookie deal. I thought the Marsh deal might have been their best move of the weekend,
yeah, 5th and 7th
outside of Richardson, because they got 2 draft picks for him. And I know they're later round picks, but in John Snyder's world, he goes for bulk on draft picks, and he wouldn't have been able to make these deals if he didn't have multiple extra picks next year. And then he has to get a couple of them back, which is what he did in trading Tremaine Brock and trading Cassius Marsh. Those moves were all about, let's get some of these draft picks back that we've traded away to make these other moves. So yeah, they went clearinghouse on the defensive line once they got Richardson. It was started to clear the decks, and that's even more underlines why this is a win now move, and that they bring in one guy and start taking 2 or 3 out of the defensive line for it.
Well, we got till September the 3rd, 2017, all the way to September the 3rd into the season, which was yesterday, before hearing that Richard Sherman is not happy with the organization. So that's fairly good. We got through all of training camp and almost got to the first regular season game before we heard Sherman spouting off about the organization. He's not happy about them cutting Kason Williams. How stunned were you that they did?
Well, this time, Dick, Richard Sherman's not out on an island on his own. Right. He's got an entire region behind him on this. I was very, very, very surprised. They keep only 5 wide receivers, and one of them is not Kason Williams. To let you know what the rest of the league thought about Williams, the Cleveland Browns, of course, who who claimed him had the first claiming rights in the NFL on the waiver wire yesterday by virtue of going to 1-15 last year. So he did not get past one team in waivers, and there were some people saying, well, he won't get past – the Seahawks can put him on the practice squad because no one will claim him. No, there was no chance of that, as the Browns claiming him with the very first waiver pick showed. There's not more than he could have done, and I think that he knows that, and deep down the Seahawks just decided that, okay, you've been a practice squad player for us for 2 years. You had a good preseason. But he wasn't in their plans, obviously, over somebody like Amara Darboh or Tanner McAvoy. And I can't imagine that the Seahawks thought they could put him back on the practice squad for a third year, that the league would not have noticed the plays he made during the preseason. It's on one hand, they talk about always compete, and Pete Carroll talks about how you perform in games is the most important factor. That doesn't jibe with what just happened, and that's what Sherman was talking about.
This is it's like a Mariner move in the Jack Sorensic era, where they have to bring guys up just because they drafted him high, and we've got to play, we got to play Mike Zunino and keep him on the team. We got to play Dustin Ackley instead of letting him be in AAA for 2 or 3 years until he's ready. It's like instead of just admitting, hey, maybe Amara Darboh isn't as good as we thought he was. Big deal. Let's just get rid of him and keep the better wide receiver. Or maybe Amara Darboh gets through and ends up on our practice squad, and we still can keep Case and Williams. Would Amara Darboh have been picked up by somebody?
I think so. I think just even some NFL teams that didn't scout Darboh all that much out of Michigan would say, whoa, a perennial Super Bowl contender playoff team drafted him in the third round. He must have something. Let's check him out. And that he would have been claimed by somebody. And I think the Seahawks knew that. And the other thing here is, and this doesn't quite apply to Darboh yet because we haven't seen him do this on special teams, but Kason Williams' one knock has been special teams, that he didn't do enough on special teams.
Right.
Now, this preseason, he made a tackle in the open field on the kickoff. After the Minnesota game, I asked him about it. He said that was actually the biggest play of the preseason for me because I need to show them that I can play special teams. They put him as a gunner on punt team. They were trying to see him at different places in special teams. It's something that, because Williams was such a star growing up at Skyline and into Washington and then got hurt with the foot at Washington, he never really played special teams, and that was his downfall in his first couple of years at Seattle while he was on the practice squad, is he didn't do enough outside of catching passes because he was pretty good at that, obviously. And I think that ultimately might have caught up to him. And when they looked at their roster and said, well, okay, if we're only going to keep 5 wide receivers, can we afford to keep Williams if he doesn't have much experience in doing special teams and performing at it at the level we need him to as one of the 52nd or 3rd guys on the roster? And no fan wants to hear that, and they see the fantastic, spectacular catches and his size and his athletic ability. But I think that ultimately may have been a large reason why he's not here.
Who's the second biggest surprise cut?
I thought you were going to ask me who the second biggest surprise guy on the roster was. I have to think about that for a minute because there were so many of them.
Maybe Desir?
Desir's size and the fact he had experience with the Lions made us that saw him every day in camp think that maybe he would stick. And they were really thrusting him in the last week or so into starting positions. They gave Sherman the week off. Yeah, Desir was one of the surprises. Reuben became less of a surprise once they got Richardson. But
right.
If you had told me before the weekend they were cutting Reuben, I would have said, well, wait a minute, they still need a run-stopping defensive tackle somewhere. So he surprised me. Tedrick Thompson making the team surprised me, honestly. And I know he's a 5th-round pick and is one of the top 4 defensive backs that they drafted. But he had some glaring mistakes in coverage during the preseason, and then after those mistakes was barely on the field during the practices, anywhere near the first team for sure. But Bradley McDougald was taking that spot of free safety. And really, McDougald could start for any other team in the league, including the Seahawks, if they didn't have Thomas and Chancellor in front of him. I was a little surprised by Tristan Thompson being on the team, but again, they don't want to take a higher draft pick and and get rid of him after only a couple months after drafting him.
Well, Greg, I've already kept you long enough, but I got one more.
Fine.
I got one more for you. Do we know anything at all about Isaiah Battle, who evidently is good enough to trade for and make the Seahawks roster?
Well, he's 6'7". I do know that. He's a supplemental draft pick from the Rams in 2015. A lot of people that talk about the Chiefs talk about him not being very good at all, and that the Seahawks in particular in that preseason game, the third preseason game, got around him pretty easily. One thing about this roster for sure, especially with the 52nd and 53rd guys on it, it's going to change. And I would be shocked if the roster as it stands this morning is the one they take to Green Bay on Sunday. Battle is definitely one of the last guys on it. There's 10 offensive linemen there. So if there's someone that they want to check out elsewhere, they will make that move. So we'll see. I haven't seen Battle on the field to make much more of a comment than that, but I will definitely say that this won't be the roster, certainly, that stays well into the regular season. It's going to change quite a bit.
All right, we'll bring the hard questions at Pete today, all right? I know you will. He's got a little splaining to do, doesn't he, today to you guys?
Yes, sir. If I'm going to work at a holiday, I might as well make it worth it. That's right.
Very good. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Dick.
You bet. Greg Bell joining us, Seahawks at 7. Wow. I mean, I only got through probably 70% of the things that I wanted to get to with him, but we got tomorrow. But Hugh, let's get you in here on these. Cason Williams. Let's start there. Cason Williams, a guy that arguably the star of camp for the entire team, and you have a franchise that prides itself on compete. It's how you practice. It's how you play. It's not where you came from. It's not where you were drafted, and yet they keep a third-round draft pick that's done absolutely bupkis for him the last month.
Yeah, and maybe you have Richard Sherman's exact tweet there. I think he said, "This makes no sense!" ! Well, I think it came down to him and Tanner McAvoy, and we kind of talked about that last week. Similar roles, big guys that they can go high and catch a ball, and I think undoubtedly the special teams plays a part in that, and the covering kicks. But I think if you're asking why Cason Williams, who was a one-time Parade All-American and Gatorade National Player of the Year, National Athlete of the Year, a guy who was destined to be a first-round draft pick, seemingly after his sophomore year, he just doesn't have the suddenness that elite receivers have. There's when you watch him run routes, what's his acceleration? If he's going to run, let's say, a 12-yard in route, how fast can he get going to full speed by about 8 yards? Can he stop on a dime? Can he then accelerate out of that cut? There's no question he has the physicality. He's got the hands. He's remade his body, committed himself to the diet. I was really pulling for him in every way, hoping that he'd make the team. But just from an analyzation standpoint, just focus on that fact. Cason Williams would be a Seattle Seahawk if he was just a little twitchier, just a little quicker. And there's obviously an understanding. If a guy's 5'10" and 192, then he better be twitchier than a guy Cason size. There's an understanding at 6'2", 219, and with that type of strength, that you don't have to be as quick as some of the other guys, but you still have to have some level of quickness, and he was deemed by Seattle to be not quite quick enough.
I mean, I wish the best for Cason, and I don't want to think that make anybody think that I think this was a terrible decision, that I think Cason Williams is going to blow up and be a Pro Bowl receiver with Cleveland. I don't think any of that. It does bother me a little bit about the whole compete mantra, and then you got a guy that just comes in and does absolutely everything he possibly can do to win a job, whereas the other guy, the third-round draft pick, has done, at least from our eyes, nothing thus far. That bothers me a little bit. But as far as Cason Williams, I mean, we've seen these in the past, Hugh. Almost every year, there's the camp star that everybody falls in love with. Last year was Troymaine Pope in the backfield. It was Nick Reed wrecking people in August a few years ago. There was like, oh, my God, this guy's going to be a star. But preseason football, regular season football, two different things.
Justin
Forsett, and
he had a nice year.
He had a nice, he had a nice with Baltimore, even more so than Seattle. But you get those guys, and I hope Kaysen succeeds. But boy, he is going to wide receiver, not even purgatory. It is wide receiver hell in Cleveland. So to think that Kaysen Williams is going to, have a 50 catch, 800-900 yard season, I would be stunned to see.
No
that.
question, history has not been kind to quarterbacks and by extension receivers. But Terrell Pryor kind of remade himself and made himself a rich man after a circuitous route, having been a college quarterback. Heck, he was in camp here as a quarterback. Mm-hmm. But he somehow found his way to Cleveland and made it work for his career. Now he's on to Washington for a ton of dough.
A lot of money.
So I would say, in an odd kind of way, Cleveland might be a good place for him at this point in his career. They've got Deshaun Kaiser. So, hey, Cleveland's going to keep throwing something at the wall until something sticks at the quarterback position. We know the revolving door that they've had. Maybe they found something, this kid. He's got NFL talent. He's a big-bodied, strong-arm guy. I don't know the rest of the roster around him offensively. Obviously, he's got to have good people for him to play well.
He's got a good running
veteran,
back,
let alone as a rookie as he is. But
they got a good running back in Cleveland.
Good left tackle,
Isaiah Crowell. They got Joe Thomas on the offensive line, so they're building some pieces.
I think in a way, sometimes it's good for guys to go to bad teams that have bad talent, where he can, instead of, if he went to a talent-laden receiving core, then he's not going to get on the field as much. Ostensibly, he's got a chance to, if he's going to continue what he's shown in camp. I, for one, am pulling for him to go to Cleveland, which, again, oddly may be a good place for him to get on the field and start to prove himself. Probably not going to be pressure situations. Not to say that Kaysen can't handle pressure situations. Heck, he was making huge catches as a true freshman in a state title game for Skyline. So I don't mean it that way. I'm just saying that he can just kind of go out there and start to get assimilated to the NFL regular season, and he may still have quite a career left in him, and I think Cleveland might be a good place to start.
A lot more Seahawks talk with Hugh Millen. We want to get his take on the newcomer, Sheldon Richardson, what he thinks he will bring to the defensive line. We'll do that after our Daily Schnoz, which comes up next here on 724 on 950 KJR. Well, let's hope you're right, Slick.
I'm right.
Let's hope you're right.
Collision course.
Slickhawk in my ear says first official day of the regular season here on Labor Day Monday, and it's our friend Tom King from the Nashville Telegraph talking about the Patriots, and it's Seahawks-Patriots collision course. What would it be? 3 years later in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You book a date, Tom? You want me to meet you out there at Manny's in Minneapolis for a steak?
Yeah, we'll pick a store in the Mall of America. How's that?
There you go. That's too far out of town. I don't want to take the train out of there. I like Minneapolis, and it's a cold weather. We joke that the Seahawks only make the Super Bowl in cold weather cities, so this is our year, Tom.
Well, let's see. What was the last one? It was
Phoenix.
It was Phoenix. Yeah. That's a warm weather city. Yeah, there you go.
But you know what? We were there, and it was 60 and rainy all week. I swear it was.
No,
it was a cold weather city that week.
Right. Any Super Bowl I go to, it's always below. The temperature's always below what it was supposed to be.
Crazy. I think we had one nice day.
Yeah, it was that way in Houston last year when I was there in Houston. For a little
crazy, man. The only nice day was Super Bowl Sunday when they actually opened the roof for us in Phoenix. The rest of the week it was rainy and 60 degrees.
And it was pretty much the same thing in Houston last year.
Really,
pretty much the same thing.
Crazy.
Yep.
Well,
follows me everywhere.
A lot going on.
It'll be like 85 or 75 and sunny. You never know.
Exactly.
Yep.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. But a lot going on with all these teams, and the Patriots no exception. Let's get to the player that the Seahawks got from New England, cornerback Justin Coleman for a 7th-round draft pick. What do you know about Justin Coleman?
Well, he didn't play in the Super Bowl. He was inactive, and he's kind of Patriots got him, and then they released him the day after they got him, back in 2015, early in September, and then Seattle actually had him.
Right.
and signed him then, and ended up getting released, and he comes back to the Patriots grabbed him off the practice squad. So the Seahawks had him 2 years ago on their practice squad after he was let go by the Patriots. And then, you're on the practice squad, anybody can sign you, and then the Patriots got him back. And in 2015, he ended up playing a lot. He played, he was in on like 21 tackles, something like that, and he was, they signed him. He was an exclusive tender in the off season last year, and they re-signed him. He didn't play a whole lot last year, and like I said, he was inactive for the Super Bowl. He's not a bad player. I mean, he's just a guy. He's just one of those guys you can pick up off the street, and he's a veteran now, and he can probably be a fourth corner on a lot of NFL teams, and that's probably what he's going to be with you guys, right?
But a guy that the Seahawks were willing at least to give up a draft pick for instead of just surfing the free agent wire and not giving anything up for him. How about the Jacoby Brissett trade? I thought a little bit interesting, particularly since the quarterback situation in New England, at least the long-term future of the quarterback situation in New England is very much up in the air. So where does that leave Patriots fans with their quarterback, say, after 2017? If Tom Brady ain't going to be able to play forever, and Garoppolo, he's got one more year left, right?
Yeah, Garoppolo's done at the end of this year.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. That was a question the last 2 weeks, is what they would do with Brissett. And, I think that you Millen could speak to this. When you played, they did separate cut-down dates. So that made a difference in the exhibition game on Thursday night, because they still had 90 guys on the roster. And so they had decided, okay, we're going to put Brissett out there. When you saw him play all four quarters, you knew he was being showcased. The question is whether they would decide, yeah, maybe we better not, or whether somebody would, they weren't going to let Brissett just go. They were going to wait until somebody wanted Brissett. And the Colts wanted him because the Colts need Andrew Luck insurance. Because Luck hasn't been around all preseason. Irsay keeps saying, he's going to be ready and everything else, but who knows? He's got a bad shoulder. So, I don't know. I think it was almost more like the Colts said, "Hey, we'll give you this if you give us Brissett. We like him, we want him." I think the Patriots said, "Okay," and I think that's how it went down, because they weren't going to let Brissett go. They put him out there, so everybody knew he was available.
Right.
But if nobody wanted him, they weren't going to put him on the practice squad, because then you lose him for nothing. He was the third-round draft pick. And believe it or not, Thursday night was really the first time any of us saw Brissett no holds barred. Just go out there and let him sling it. And he's very good. He looks like he's very good at that. Mm-hmm. Because when he played last year, the two games he played in, they had him, basically with a basic playbook. So he really was just out there not to lose the game. And then, he had to play with the bad thumb. So, and he wasn't going to throw in that game. That was a game against the Bills. So the game against the Texans, that's when he got hurt. But his job was to basically just not lose that game. So it was the first time we saw him really, okay, here's the book, do what you want, go out there, have fun. And that's what he did, and he showed his ability. So I think the Colts pounced on that.
Tom, great stuff. We might have to steal you again on Friday morning after the Pats open up the season on Thursday night, all right?
Yeah, I'll be getting in when you guys are ready to call.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom.
All right, guys.
You bet. Tom King from the Nashua Telegraph as the Patriots take on the Chiefs on Thursday night to kick off the NFL season. Here's story number 2 on the Daily Schnoz.
Development. The Daily Schnoz.
We've been talking about it quite a bit today in Seattle, Washington. I can't even imagine how much they're talking about it in College Station, Texas, and that was the biggest comeback win in college football in 10 years, and I believe Hugh said it was the second biggest comeback of all time in college football. Just only one point away, right? From the biggest come from behind win.
It had to be. Well, it had to be at least second.
Yeah,
unless there was a tie for first.
Unbelievable. Scott Clendenin from KZNE in College Station, Texas, to talk about it. And Scott, we'll talk about the game, and then we'll talk about the fallout afterwards, because there's been quite a bit of fallout since. But have you ever seen anything like that, specifically with teams that you've been covering?
Well, it was, it was kind of like a big rock rolling downhill. It's just, was it going to get to the bottom and crash into the A&M program or not? Or would something come along and derail it? And it certainly was the biggest comeback I've seen in at the end of a game of any team that I've been covering. So, it was one for the ages. And tip your hat to Josh Rosen. He was given the opportunity. He made the most of it. A&M inches away 2 or 3 times in that fourth quarter from putting that game away and not having this conversation this morning. Probably people in College Station would be calling Los Angeles to see what the reaction was there.
Well,
but it was that close of a game both ways.
You've got 2 coaches that are on the hot seat. I think Kevin Sumlin's seat even hotter than Jim Mora's seat. And now with this loss, you already have a member of the Texas A&M Board of Regents coming out on Facebook criticizing Kevin Sumlin and his staff, saying he will not support Kevin Sumlin if the conversation comes up for his potential ouster. So what's the scuttlebutt following Tony Busby's Facebook post, which is now all over the internet on CBSSports.com?
Well, I think that the scuttlebutt is no different than the athletic director in the summer saying you had to win games. And I think that, I didn't watch the game today thinking that it was a must-win game. Mm-hmm. I think how A&M plays this year is as important as wins or losses, but there is a cutoff point. You've got to win games, and I was under my general perception was Arkansas conference game, week 4 of the season, was going to be more important than UCLA. But the problem is it's maybe the microcosm of Kevin Sumlin the last 3 years is the great start and then didn't finish that has gone on with the seasons after the 5-0s and 6-0 starts, that you look back now and you see this is in a game, a great start, a big lead, and then the second half you didn't finish the job and you take the loss. And I think that's the frustration's a boiling point on people that don't want to support Kevin Sumlin. That's what they're going to point to. But with 11 more games to go, what can A&M get better at that they saw in the game, and can they keep this from happening again? Because they did play pretty good football for 3/4 of this football game. Yeah. And then Josh Rosen, if not the first quarterback taken, one of the first quarterbacks taken, showed why he's the prospect everybody's thought since he first enrolled at UCLA.
Finally, 3 consecutive 8-5 seasons for Kevin Sumlin and a conference record of under 500. If he puts up, let's say, the exact same season he has the last couple of years and goes 8-5 with a 4-4 conference record, is he still the coach of this team next year?
It depends on who you lose those 4 games to. I really do. You have got to stay away from losing to Mississippi. And the Mississippi schools, obviously, that was a big craw in everybody's sack last year. You got to go out there and play better against LSU. A win over LSU at the end of the year, and you're 8-5. That's a little bit different story. But I also think that you're not 4-4. Now that you've taken a loss to UCLA and you're going to be 8-5. So I think that everything that's going on with this program, that Kevin Sumlin understands the pressure he was under this year, but he also understands that he can't have breakdowns that led to the fourth quarter and come from behind losses. I think still how you play, who you lose to, taking care of your home field is very, very important for his future at Texas A&M, and he has 11 more chances to do that.
Scott, appreciate it very much. Thanks.
All right, have a great day.
You bet. Scott Clendenin from KZNE in College Station, Texas, after that miraculous come-from-behind victory by UCLA. 30 seconds away, Seahawk fans, from finding out a little bit more about your newest defensive lineman. We'll go to New York and talk Sheldon Richardson next.
When I say the word snacks, you probably think chips and cookies, things that are considered unhealthy. But when I say snacks from Nature Box, I'm talking about over 80 delicious snacks made with simple ingredients, all under 200 calories per serving. Snacks like Asiago and cheddar cheese crisps and sriracha roasted cashews delivered straight to your door. Visit naturebox.com/radio, and for a limited time, get a free box with 4 snacks. That's a $19 value for free. Visit naturebox.com/radio for your free box with 4 snacks today.
This important bulletin from the United Press. Flash.
The Daily Schnoz.
Hawks making a big splash this weekend, and Manish Mehta from the New York Daily News is here to talk about it. The newest defensive lineman for the Hawks is Sheldon Richardson, straight from the New York Jets. Manish, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Not really a surprise from the Jets' standpoint because it didn't sound like Sheldon Richardson was all that happy there. Is that fair?
Actually, he was pretty happy there. I think the team, however, needed to make a decision on one of their defensive linemen because they have a fairly stacked defensive line room with Mo Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson and Leonard Williams, and they felt that that surplus could be used to get a future draft pick because, as you guys know and everybody in the league knows, they're kind of building for tomorrow as opposed to worrying about today. Sheldon Richardson's talent's undeniable. If you play him at his natural position, which is a 3-tech defensive tackle shading outside the guard, he is going to be a force. He has proven to be a force with the Jets in that position, and I would suspect that John Schneider wouldn't trade for him if he wasn't going to put Richardson in a position to succeed. So I would anticipate he won't be playing out of position like he had been for the last year and a half under Todd Bowles.
So that's what's caused his dip in production from when he was a Pro Bowler.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think if you talk to people around the league, they'll tell you you don't want Sheldon Richardson being an outside linebacker. Now, he was the most versatile piece that Todd Bowles had, much more versatile than Leonard Williams and Mo Wilkerson. So in order to get all 3 of those guys on the field at the same time, it made sense for Bowles to try Richardson at an outside linebacker spot. Now, he wasn't exclusively playing there. They were moving him around a lot, but every snap in which you have him in a 2-point stance as an edge setter is a wasted snap in my mind, because of the talent that he has and because of the talent that he can bring to a defensive line at his natural position. So I think he's going to be playing interior line as he should have been all along. I think that's how Pete Carroll is going to use him, and I would be surprised if he doesn't have a really a monster season with that group up there.
What's he do best?
Tremendous run stuffer, tremendous in terms of weak side pursuit. If you're running the ball away from him, he's not going to give up on a play if he's lined up at that 3-tech spot. So he's got an incredible motor. He's got a love for football. You talk to teammates, they'll tell you that right away. His coaches eventually will know that if they don't know that right now. He's got a world of talent. He's got a world of confidence. And I think that being in a winning environment for the first time in his career, even really dating back to college, I think will do wonders for him.
Exciting. Very exciting for Seahawk fans. Manish, thank you very much.
Thanks. Take care.
You bet. Manish Mehta from the New York Daily News on the newest member of the Seattle Seahawks, and we will get Hugh Millen's take on that, as that has been another episode of the Daily Schnoz.
Well, that's the news. I'm out of here.
The Daily Schnoz, brought to you by Michael's Toyota of Bellevue on Sports Radio 950 KJR.
Hugh's got something to say at 8 o'clock today. I want to get his take on Sheldon Richardson here as well. We've got Fact or Fiction, day number 1 of our football season-long contest, where you simply hear one of us on the morning show give a prediction for this upcoming weekend's action, either college or pro, and you will text in either fact or fiction. That's all you got to do. We'll do that at 8:30 today. We'll give you our first game of the week. Mike Holmgren at 9 o'clock. Great debate at 9:30 right here on 950 KJR. We're turning the radio station over to Hugh Breedlove Millen. I'm just going to go home.
Good. Okay,
and,
Hugh.
And we're just turning it over to Hugh Breedlove Millen here for the next half hour or so.
You see this? You just need to push this button, okay? And turn out the lights when you go home.
That's right. Hugh Sheldon Richardson, an exciting name, an exciting proposition to have him as a member of the defensive line. It did not come without cost. Cost you a second-round draft pick. Cost you Reuben. Probably cost you Cassius Marsh as well, although you got a couple of picks for Cassius Marsh. So all in all, before we talk about what Sheldon Richardson's going to do for this football team, how much did the Seahawks gain versus how much did they lose in your mind?
Well, you're talking about a second-round draft pick, so whatever you could have acquired there, I think they're in a go-now mode right now, and I think they should. You got too many guys on that defense that are in the prime of their career. And Sheldon Richardson now marks the 8th Pro Bowler on that defense. It's on paper a prodigious defense, and so I think what's interesting to me about the Richardson acquisition is maybe a little bit of a paradigm shift, as evidenced by the moves that Seattle's made in this regard. Their defensive prowess, and they've been wildly spectacular, by far the best defense over the last 5 years. I mean, they went 4 years and won the scoring title, and then last year they dropped, but they only down to third. So they're far and away the best defense over the last handful of years, and yet in that process they've never really needed great play from their 3 technique. In the 4-man front that they play, you have a nose tackle type guy like you had with Brandon Mebane, who sits on the shoulder of the center, but then the guy who sits on the outside shade of the guard, who tries to get the one-on-one matchups and first down. Now I know you've got Michael Bennett dropping inside sometimes in third down, but that 3 technique spot has been, you've had Alan Branch and Tony McDaniel and just kind of guys coming and going. There's been 4 or 5 guys.
Clinton McDonald,
yeah. McDaniel McDonald, Tyba Rubin. You kind of pick up. I mean, they have not expended high resources at the 3 technique position. They're expending high resources at other spots on the defense. Great acquisitions with that Averill and Michael Bennett. You hit home runs in the 5th round with Sherman and Chancellor, and a high pick on Earl Thomas. So either money or draft picks have really been spent, but I think a little bit of an aberration in terms of how few resources have been spent on that 3 technique for a team that plays a 40 front like Seattle. But coming in the draft, Malik McDowell, or coming out of it, I should say, Malik McDowell, what did we hear? Hey, this is a guy that we haven't had a guy like that. He has a special skill set. We've never had a 3 technique like him. We've been trying to acquire one like him. And so, again, just, the shift in philosophy, like, hey, can we get something out of there? Meaning most teams who run a 40 when they play good defense, your 3 technique, to put it in baseball terms, is you maybe your 5 or 6 hitter, in a few isolated cases like Warren Sapp, it could be your 4-hole, Seattle's been content to have their 3 technique be their, the 8 hitter.
Yeah.
And so now they're jumping up. They say, no, we want to have a guy who can be a 5 hitter, or a 6 hitter at the 3 technique. And, I'm obviously mixing sports but trying to come up with a metaphor just in terms of seemingly a new primacy on playmaking ability from that position. You give up a second round. There's a team that is in the Super Bowl window. Who knows what that second round pick could be? Hammered down. You get a guy in Sheldon Richardson. I think one of the most interesting things about him, when he was at Missouri, well-coached Gary Pinkel team, they had a scheme where with Johnny Manziel, they had Sheldon Richardson spying on Johnny Manziel, meaning they felt like they had the feeling that he could run sideline to sideline. Now, it sounds a little cockeyed, but they actually did that, and you don't do that with a guy who's not a terrific athlete. So I think on some level, I got to be careful here because what I might actually think as a fan, I don't want to make irresponsible statements on the radio, but it just seems like, because I got to back something up like this, but you've heard people talking some questions about his character, whether or not he's going to give great effort. He had 8 sacks, then it went to 5, then last year 1.5, and so let's understand that from the Jets standpoint, they dumped $67 million in. I mean, they're just from Eric Decker to in this case Sheldon Richardson. They're dumping a lot of guys. I'm trying to get the Ryan Clady at $11 million, Darrelle Revis $9 million, Nick Mangold, and so they've got an unprecedented dump. And so for Sheldon Richardson, who probably was their most talented guy at the moment they just made this trade, they are totally rebuilding.
They're doing the Philadelphia 76ers. Of
we
the last
haven't
3 or 4
seen this
years.
in the NFL.
Right.
We only see this about every 5 or 10 years, where it's just an overt, just tank the season. Now they'll never use those terms, but let's be real. And so you get a guy that 2013 was his first year. He's not young, he's not old, he's kind of right there in his prime. And if he can come in here and whatever questions there had been, remember the Jets were a bad football team. So let's hope from the Seattle perspective
he's
that
on a good
any
team,
questions,
and he's in a contract year as well. I mean, that's a double whammy for you there.
Yeah. So year 2 was his best year. 8 sacks and a Pro Bowl. That was 2014. Slid a little, and there's some questions about, well, how is he handling, playing on a down team? Well, you know what? These are the same questions we asked about Malik McDowell. Think about the similarities there, where you have a talented 3 technique whose performance has dipped, and in some people's eyes, the attitude has dipped. Again, I don't want to be irresponsible here, but what was the commonality? Well, by the way, they both are in green and white, but
they play the same position.
And they play the same position, and they were losing, and maybe these guys just weren't great in a losing environment. I think you bring this guy in. He's been enough of a playmaker. You just watch the tape of him. He's extremely athletic for a man of his build. Not quite as thick as a Cortez Kennedy, but on some level, you watch him and you kind of think of a young Cortez Kennedy. So I'm delighted.
Yeah.
I just think you got to hammer down right now when you look at the contracts and the age of these Seahawks. Go out and get yourself another Lombardi. Really do it.
You
hammer
think
down.
about the big names they have brought in through trade: Marshawn Lynch, Percy Harvin, Jimmy Graham, Sheldon Richardson. 7:58 on 950 KJR. Hugh has got something to say. Right around the corner here in the 8 o'clock hour, Mike Holmgren at 9. Great debates. And our debut of Fact or Fiction comes up at 8:30 on 950 KJR. Here we go, rolling into the 8 o'clock hour. Laboring on a Labor Day. It's going to be a hot one today. 90 degrees. Beautiful, beautiful Labor Day. Hopefully you're enjoying yourself. Hopefully you're not having to work today. But as Hugh said at 6 o'clock today, and he's exactly right, it's a labor of love, man. We could be doing a lot of things and not talking about sports, How would you like, you mentioned the guy laying asphalt. How'd you like to be the guy laying asphalt today when it's 92 degrees out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? That's...
Yeah,
you tip your cap to those gentlemen and ladies out there.
Yeah, I never understood sports radio guys that come in and bellyache about having to work. On the air.
Yep. It's pretty good gig we got here.
Even when it's out at the VMAC and they're cold.
Yeah, that's
that too.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But you know what? I don't have to do that anymore. It's all over. It's all over but the shouting.
Don't get to do that anymore.
Mariners blast the A's 10-2. As we get to your top of the hour headlines, they sweep the series. They did exactly what we demanded they do. Sweep a crappy Oakland team and get back in this race, which is what they have done. They are 2.5 games out in the wild card. Robinson Cano 4 for 5 with a home run and 4 RBIs. Andrew Albers goes 6 innings, allowing 1 run to improve to 3-1. We've been talking a lot about the rally by UCLA yesterday. If you didn't get a chance to see it, or if you haven't heard about it yet, they were down 44-10 in the late stages of the third quarter, and they come back and score 35 unanswered points, 5 consecutive touchdowns, including 1 inside a minute left to get the win over Texas A&M, 45-44. Big injury in college football. You just hate to see this for any team, but particularly a team that has national championship aspirations despite their loss to Alabama. you could say that Florida State was very much in the mix. They just run the table, win that ACC, and they're back in the Final Four, but probably not now without their quarterback, DeAndre Francois, suffering a season-ending patellar tendon injury. And the Dogs, Hugh Millen, pull away in the second half for a 30-14 win at Rutgers. Dante Pettis ties a Pac-12 career record with his 6th punt return touchdown. And that's where we're going for Hugh's Got Something to Say today, huh?
You want to know when the kicker's kicking really good?
When
he's banging the cameraman at training camp.
Hugh's got something to say.
Haven't talked much Dogs today. Now it's time, Dog fans.
Yeah. Well, when I was approached, they said, just, hey, whatever's on your mind, go. I said, all right, you sure you want this? Okay.
You sure you want this?
No. But, I think it'd be good to just kind of have a discussion about the Husky game and kind of where we are and what the takeaway is and what have you. And I think for the Huskies, they go back east, obviously 3 time zones. You're playing a Big Ten team, and I made the mention earlier, Dick, and I hope it bears repeating, that in Rutgers, I don't see an immensely talented team. They were a 2-win team a year ago, but I do think that they're better in the trenches, and just kind of looking at them and looking at the documentary about their brand new weight program and how committed they are, and it's a spectacular weight room. So I can just kind of, my sense is when a program does that, there's this real renewed, they get this vigor and so I think that their physicality played out. Rutgers' physicality played out a little better. I'm not trying to paint Rutgers as a good football team by Big Ten standards. Probably a wise betting man would bet that they're going to be at the bottom of the Big Ten. But they might be a little better in the trenches. And I said, I think the weakness of that team is just their team speed. The guys out there that are chasing guys and trying to run away from guys, they're just not very, very good at doing that because they're not very fast. But I think some of the disappointment for me in the Huskies, I'm cautioned by my own thought that the defense is a beehive and offense is a symphony. And sometimes early in a season, it's hard to get the orchestration going. Mm-hmm. And there's just a certain timing, and that was evident. I thought even with the veteran linemen, some real communication issues about how they're double teaming and how they're going to pass off and rise to the second level and some of their zone blocking. I thought they were kind of they weren't as sound as normal on their backside blocking, so it seemed like there was too many guys getting beat. I'm talking about the Huskies' offensive line right now. Too many guys getting beat. Washington should be able to run the ball better than they did. They just, that didn't look right to my eye. The Rutgers was 5.7 yards per attempt a year ago defensively against the run, 3rd worst in all of college football.
Yeah, you mentioned that on Friday with me.
Yeah, and so and the thought was that the Huskies might be a little bit perplexed in how they want to attack it because scheme-wise they would suggest to throw the football, but personnel-wise the strength was they had a returning secondary. But nonetheless, I just thought that the Huskies were kind of underwhelming in their offensive line play, and even, as I said, veterans. I mean, for the most part, you look at Trey Adams, he's a terrific player, and he had a damn good game, but he had a couple busts, and the same thing with Caleb McGarity on the other side. So you think of the strength of the offensive line, solid games, but not dominating games. And when
did you felt like they were dominating later on in the game?
Yeah, I think they wore on them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it just seemed like when you got a heavyweight leaning on something for a while, it's eventually going to break. I kind of felt like that heavyweight just started leaning heavier and heavier on Rutgers.
Yeah, and that's one of the points to make. But there's no question that their physicality, kind of it played its part in the second half, and that's one of the theories behind the running game. And it's good to have Nick Harris as their left guard.
He's a big boy now.
Yeah,
all of a sudden.
Yeah, and
wasn't a big boy last year.
I beg your pardon, right guard. when he pulls to the left, he's athletic and he can fit on some guys. So I think that they can have a good offensive line. When Jake Browning took that sack, that's one of the most vicious hits you're liable to see.
Goodness.
You could watch 5-10 years of Husky football, let alone and maybe even Pac-12 football, and not see a hit like that. That's a communication problem. You got all your receivers going out to the left, and when you have a receiver running hot, the running back's vacating. You want to have the line slide to the side away from the quarterback's direction. The center in that case, they have an ability to pick that up if the center just slides to the right. And so the center slides to the left, even though there's three guys to that side. That means you only got a right guard and a right tackle. So if Jake Browning's looking to his left and the center is blocking to his left, so Jake's hot, the running back is in what we call a free release, so all of his hots would be to the left. You would want to have three guys picked up on the right side. You'd want that center going sliding to the right, and obviously it's a breakdown in how they were handling.
So that was a center's issue then.
No, I'm not gonna say, because it's possible that they called a protection that just allowed for 2-on-3. If they had a protection 2-on-3 to Jake Browning's right side, the Huskies built a rare 4-by-1 formation. They got a bunch to the left, but the running back was set to the bunch side. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So defenses count. There's 5 eligible receivers, and you're either going to have 3-by-2, or in some isolated cases you have 4-by-1. You don't see 4-by-1 formations. And what I mean by that is they count from the outside in. The widest receiver's 1, then the next guy's 2, and then 3, and so usually you'll have, even in a balanced set where it's just a dead mirrored formation. Well, whichever way the running back goes, he becomes number 3 to that side. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's relatively rare. I'm not going to say it's exceedingly rare, but you only see a 4-by-1 formation created about 10% of the time. So the Huskies create 4-by-1, and all of the action is to Jake Browning's left. So if they're going to have the center go to the left, then they got to be hot off of the right. The split end's got to run a slant, or you got to do something else.
You got to get the ball out quick.
Well, let's work backwards. Let's reverse engineer that hit.
Okay.
You start with that cannot happen. Okay.
Yeah.
That is the final sentence in the evaluation. That can't happen. All right. Now work your way backwards.
All right.
And what I would say is the preferred way to do that is, if you have everybody going left, have your center, and you got a threat of 3 to one side, have your center slide to the right, and then the quarterback, any hot is developing from the side that the formation, the route concept is developing, and he can throw hot. So at any rate, it's just that type of thing, and they may have called for that and just didn't communicate it out. So that's the type of thing where I say there's a certain orchestration involved. The timing of how those guys were blocking, they'll be better, but it wasn't good enough on Friday.
How much concern with what you saw from the defensive front on that, the first couple possessions there were really looked like they were getting pushed back, and I'm sitting here in the stinking BC Ferries line waiting for my ferry, watching on my TV or watching on my phone going, wait a second, this is Vita Vea and Greg Gaines and Jalen Johnson, and they are getting blown off the ball.
Yeah. How
concerned were you at that, or because it all, after the first couple series, it all seemed to kind of get back to where it should be with the Husky defensive line dominating the front there?
Well, I would say there was a certain lack of physicality that the Huskies had. I guess I'm on some level there. Obviously, you go when you win 30-14 against a Big Ten team, 3 time zones away.
Mm-hmm.
You take it.
Yeah.
Despite the hit that we just talked about on Browning, he comes out, I believe, healthy. Haven't heard anything to the contrary, but you say, okay, was that a Rembrandt? No. Did they play their A game? No. But You take a win. In the end, it was a comfortable win. It wasn't a blowout. It wasn't a nail-biter. I would say it was a comfortable win where, for the most part, the Huskies had control of the football game early on. But
very close to a blowout,
the physicality.
Too, I mean, they're a pick six away. And was it Miles Bryant who had it in his hands, was going to the house for 31-7.
Yeah.
I mean, that was if that ball's not tipped, he's got it and he's gone. And
I guarantee you, Rutgers is pointing at a play or two where they're saying,
no, that's true.
If this play goes well for us, if we, how do we let Dante Pettis drop a punt? And then, if we just cover,
I forgot he did drop it first, didn't he?
If we just cover the punt, where are we emotionally, in the first half? Can we really start to hammer? But getting back, the physicality. And I guess the part I would have to get off my chest, there's a certain physicality you expect. And God bless Drew Sample. He's a really good tight end for the Huskies. But
had a couple nice
catches.
catches.
I will just tell you this, in my opinion, behind closed doors, he catches a crossing route early in that game, and he starts dancing on a DB. When he had a chance to lower his shoulder and go get a first down. That is not how we play. That you put an end to that right now. That is not the type of physicality and lack thereof that we're going to put on tape. Nobody's going to see us doing. We are not going to have tight ends catch crossing routes and have a chance to truck somebody for a first down and have them start dancing and then get shoved meagerly out of bounds, short of a first down. So Drew Sample had a nice catch and run before. I don't know how he broke a tackle. He's a valuable part of this team. I love Will Dissly as a blocker, so I think that they're in good shape at tight end. But that one was just kind of representative to me. Like, Washington's got to be more physical. They got to have they got to have a sledgehammer mentality, and that might have been the most obvious example of a play where they didn't have it. So I think they'll pick it up in that regard. Defensively, as you said, now Rutgers was doing some what we call inline optioning. You always think of in the read zone that you're reading the end, but they were leaving the defensive tackles unblocked, and they were doing read zone off the defensive tackles. Guys totally unblocked. That led to a face mask penalty by Jalen Johnson. You saw that one. They were just optioning off of Vita Vea and Greg Gaines at various points, and so that's a scheme that you have to come back and you have to talk about it and kind of get that right. But I thought that Vita Vea and Greg Gaines, they were two gapping, which they're just kind of holding they're not trying to surge a gap. That's what they do. That's what their body style suggests. But when they're playing that really well, they're still getting a little bit more push, and they're shedding and being destructive. And there were some examples in the second half where they did that, but I didn't think they did that consistently enough. I thought they got pushed back a little bit too much. Linebackers, now I think Azim Victor really would have helped this game, and I don't know. I just felt like the Rutgers line was kind of pushing a little too much. I expected more, and so that front seven, I think they got to get off blocks a little more. They got to be more active. I tell you, the most impressive thing I saw. Well, the most impressive thing I saw all weekend was UCLA's comeback, of course, but if you have not seen Michigan's defense was just jaw-dropping. Everybody's saying, well, they lost 10 starters. They only have one starter back. You cannot believe the cats that are out there running on the Michigan defense. Right. It looked like they had 15 guys. Can somebody look up how many yards Florida had?
And they were behind. Michigan was behind at halftime because of the.
And it was two pick sixes where Florida gets their scores. If you look at what Florida's offense did, or I should say, did not do against Michigan, it was stunning how fast those guys were. And so I bring that up in the context of talking about the Huskies. If the Huskies have aspirations to win a national title, they got to be more like a hornet's nest.
Why weren't they? I mean, they have the same guys, basically. I mean, in the secondary is different, but, up front, they got the same guys.
Well, there's a little bit of a philosophy difference. As I said, the Huskies want to have two big guys up there, two-gapping, and just kind of controlling the A and B gaps. You work inside out on that regard, where I said mathematically on receivers, you work outside in, 1, 2, 3, working from the sideline in towards the core of the formation. From a gap standpoint, the A gap is between center and the guard. The B gap is between the guard and the tackle and what have you. And so the Huskies, what they do is they line up with essentially two nose guards. They're playing a 4-man front, and they're playing with two nose guards. Their mentality, their body style, the philosophy, the technique. It's like playing, think of the 3-4 and having a nose tackle on the center. They play with two nose tackles, and they want to just gum up the A and the B gaps. But I think they're talented enough to do more. I think that they can get a little bit more push. They can two gap, meaning read either gap, have their hands on those shoulder pads, and then when they see something, throw that lineman aside and make a tackle. So
to answer your question on Michigan, Florida ran the ball, if you include the quarterback sacks, which you do in college football, 27 times for 11 yards.
Yeah.
If you take out the quarterback sacks, it's 19 carries for 18 yards.
19 carries, 18 yards. And what about the sacks? You want to talk about a quarterback under siege? Michigan's defense.
8 sacks minus 29 yards.
Michigan's defense was stunning. Absolutely stunning. Either Florida, I can't conceive of how Florida could be that down, but they got pantsed. That coaching staff. Oh boy, man, that was an ugly sight. Watching what Michigan did to Florida in that game. Anyways,
now Florida, you're like you mentioned, they were without 10 guys, but
were they without their how many linemen were missing?
That I don't know. I just know they were without 10 guys, including a couple of really impact offensive players.
Yeah, the stack was that accounts for some of that. But tell me how many offensive linemen for Florida was out.
Right.
If you're telling me it was the entire second
Florida's
string,
offense scored 3 points in the game.
I'd say, yeah. Well, I don't want to make this about Michigan. I'm just saying the comparison where within one weekend you can put your eyes on what appears to be an elite defense.
Right.
And then you say, okay, well, how were the Huskies compared to that? I don't know. I thought that defensively they were just. Now, sticky is a term that's used that could be a good thing in coverage. If your corners are sticky, that's a good thing. If your defensive linemen and your linebackers are sticky in terms of their run defense, that's not good. That means they're not getting off blocks. And so
well, if you just go back to last year, though, what were we saying? Weren't we saying something similar about the Husky defense after the Arizona game, where they allowed 4 touchdowns?
Yeah.
That was their first road game of last season.
They'll get it straightened out. Now, positive. Taylor Rapp, absolutely love that dude's game. Great. Hey, he's back there, and when they're playing single safety, he's playing free safety. He doesn't have the range of Earl Thomas, but he has the mentality and he has the tackling ability of Earl Thomas. I mean, stopping okay.
Relatively so.
Yes. Taylor Rapp, he really put it out there. So big flowers to him, man. He brought it. Great exhibition of both tackling technique and warrior mentality. Like a guy that's just saying, hey, if you guys miss a gap, I'm going to clean this thing up. And that's what you want from free safety. So I thought he was terrific. Byron Murphy, we talked all through camp about, a
lot of pressure on that kid, and boy, he came through in spades,
beating a lot of drums for Byron Murphy. The playmaking ability that he has in camp, that was phenomenal. Jordan Miller was more quiet, but a lot of times for a cornerback, quiet is a good thing. He's got a lot of talent, so getting that young secondary, you could see him even get better through the course of the game. JoJo McIntosh, he had some nice coverage reads on a tight end, and he was in a good position. So I felt like even within a game for those young guys, they got better. And they were not my concern. They're not my concern. I thought edge pressure would be the concern. And
they only had 1 sack and it was on the last play.
Yeah. So I think the question of edge pressure is still there for that
Absolutely.
Husky defense. Having their front seven pushed back, that's a little bit of a no-no, but as you said, I think they're going to correct that. But, that's just kind of some observations. I think credit the Huskies for creating the bar themselves so high that a guy like me can come here and do a segment like this where on a 16-point win
on the road
against a Big Ten team that we can sit there and say, didn't hate it, didn't love it, but just wanted to talk through some of the good and some of the bad.
That's what we've been doing with the Seahawks the last few years. I mean, when the Seahawks go on the road and beat the Jets and not look that great doing it, you're kind of like,
But you know what? That in itself is a compliment,
of course,
because you're saying, hey, you have performed at a level consistently enough. You've coached at a level consistently enough. Then when we see that, we can say, back in 2008, we'd be elated.
We beat Rutgers on the road.
Right.
825 on 950 KJR. A new segment coming up that's going to occur both in this show as well as Softy's show on a daily basis all through football season. And you have a chance to participate in it. We will explain it next. It's called Fact or Fiction, and it comes up on 950 KJR. You just made that, huh?
Add some help.
That's pretty good.
Add some help.
Day number 1 of our Fact or Fiction contest presented by our friends at the Emerald Queen Casino. And my, oh my, has the Emerald Queen Casino been generous. Have they ever been generous?
Stepping up as they always do.
Oh, my goodness. Here's what we're going to do. It's very, very simple. Listen now and forever hold your peace. What we will do is on the morning show at 8:30, every single day between now and December the 1st, the only 2 days we aren't going to do it is Thanksgiving Day because we're not going to be here, and the day after Thanksgiving because we're not going to be here. But other than that, every single show you hear,
including Labor Day, that's today.
Including Labor Day, yes it is, on the morning show at 8:30, on Dave Softy Mahler's show at 3:30, we will make a pick.
Will we do it on Columbus Day?
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes it'll be me making a pick.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be one of our guests making a pick. It
Right.
could be Rick Neuheisel making a pick. We know he loves making picks.
Yes, he does.
Yes, he does.
Did he get his on Friday, by the way?
He did not.
Oh,
Rick
0 for 1?
Neuheisel's 0 for 1 on the season.
Ricky.
Yes, sir. Sometimes it'll be Slickhawk making the pick.
Yeah.
You know who it won't be making the pick ever?
Hugh Breedlove.
This guy to my
Miller.
left will never be asked.
You guys and your damn prediction.
to make a pick for this
It's
contest.
fun, Hugh.
It's fun, Hugh. Each week, anyone who texts in the 12 minutes after we make a pick, fact if they think our pick is going to come true, or fiction if they think we're full of crap and our pick is not going to come through with the victory. Anybody that enters in 12 minutes with fact or fiction at 49451 on the texting line will be eligible to win $1,000, which will be a weekly giveaway. Each week, anyone who texts in a correct answer, either fact or fiction, will be eligible to win that $1,000. On Monday morning at 8:30, one weekly winner will be announced from all eligible entries. So, obviously, the more you play,
the better your chances.
The better your chances to win. Now, can you win if you have only one raffle ticket in the box? Of course you can win. Do you have a better chance to win if you have 10 raffle tickets in the box? Of course you do.
Even Green River math would dictate that
right.
is more likely.
So listen at 8:30 every day, listen at 3:30 every day, and then simply right after you hear the pick, text in fact or fiction. You have 12 minutes to do so after the pick is made. Now, at the end of the contest, that's not all the money Emerald Queen's giving away. They're just throwing money at us, okay? Not just the $1,000 weekly prize. At the end of the contest, the person with the most overall correct guesses wins $10,000. So that's really where you want to play because let's face it, can you win the $1,000 weekly prize if you only play once? Yeah, you can. Can you win the $10,000 if you only play once a week?
No. No.
You're going to have to play a lot, and you're going to have to win a lot for you to be eligible for that $10,000 prize at the end of the contest, which is December the 1st. So, are we going to have like some dramatic picking music here when we do our picks?
I mean, I've got this right now.
All right, we can do.
It's going to be an ever-evolving thing.
Will.
I think.
Oh, absolutely.
The way it sounds. But this is what we're going to do for today because
I have thrust upon Matt Slickhawk Mikolas,
that's just wrong to do.
The pressure of making the first pick of the entire contest. We got a 3-month contest, and Slickhawk is going to make the first pick. Where are you going, Slick
Look, if
Hawk?
I'm going to kick this whole fact or fiction thing off for the morning show, I can do any game. I can do whatever. Football this weekend, right?
Football this weekend, college or pro,
right.
whatever you want to do. You can do tonight. You know, there's a game tonight. You can do tonight's game. You can't do tonight's game.
No.
Shockey, Assistant Program Director Kevin Shockey is waving off the Tennessee game.
Waved it off.
No.
That's not what I prepared anyway.
Okay, gotcha.
If I'm going to kick this thing off, I got to go somewhere close to home. I have to go with my school. Now, you would think, oh, Slick Hawk, that means Oregon, right? Nope, not so much. I'm actually going to go somewhere else.
All right.
You know, Army went into last weekend's game with Fordham as a 16.5-point favorite. The mighty Black Knights defeated Fordham 64-6. They did this, mind you, with a quarterback who actually went 0 for 2 passing.
And they scored
Army.
They scored over 60. See, passing's overrated, Hugh.
That's right.
You really don't need a quarterback. You can score 60 points by just rushing the ball every single time.
Give
all right.
me the wing T. Army ran all over Fordham, 47 carries for 513 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns.
All
So
right.
this week, we've got Army as a 16.5-point favorite again, going into Buffalo to face SUNY Buffalo.
There's even a line on that game?
And we're going to go with them. The Army Black Knights will cover, giving 16.5 against the SUNY Buffalo Bills.
That has got to be. I'm going to predict right now that will be the most randomly selected game in this entire 3-month span.
Army over SUNY Buffalo.
SUNY. I don't even know where to go there if I go fact or fiction on that.
Are there rules here? What if you said, I predict Washington's going to beat Montana in Husky Stadium Saturday?
I think you got to go with the
It's by the point spread.
Point spread,
By the point
You got to
spread.
go by the point spread.
They got to cover.
Uh-huh. And by the way, I don't even think there is a point spread on that.
Yeah, there is no line for the Huskies in Montana.
Yeah.
So remind me again, how many yards did Army throw for?
None.
That'd be 0. He was over
So
0
if
for
you're
2.
looking for me and you can't find me, one place you don't have to look for him is me watching an Army game.
Not even Army-Navy?
Maybe he's home
What about
watching
Army-Navy?
the Army game.
Come on.
You watch Army-Navy, don't you?
Army-Navy.
I've watched that.
It's the only game going on
Red-blooded
that Saturday.
American got to watch the Army-Navy game, even though they don't throw the ball very much. But I hear you. All right, Slickhawk. 12 minutes. The clock is underway. Tick, tick, tock. 49451. Text in fact if you think Army is going to cover the spread. What'd you say it was 16.5?
16.5.
Will Army cover the 16.5-point spread this weekend after putting up over 62 points in game number 1? Text in fact or fiction to
really easy.
49451.
The Emerald Queen Casino is giving away a lot of money, and it's up to you to take it. It's right there.
And the Emerald Queen Casino right now is shaking their head going, our first game is SUNY. All right.
That's Army. Focus on Army.
That's Slickhawk. All right, we'll
Fact or
come
fiction?
back. We'll come back with more Hugh Breedlove Millen. We got Mike Holmgren at the top of the hour on 950 KJR.
What's that?
I just learned that SUNY Buffalo is the same thing as the University at Buffalo. Not the University of Buffalo, mind you, but the University at Buffalo, the Buffalo Bulls.
Yes.
Because I was a little bit worried, Slick, because when you made the pick of SUNY Buffalo, I went to Army's schedule, and I was like, oh, crap. It says here they're playing Buffalo, not SUNY. I hope you haven't made a terrible mistake on our first fact or fiction. But no, nay, you have not made a terrible mistake. They are, in fact, the same school. They just have
As I'm informed,
changed
SUNY
it.
stands for State University of New York.
That's right. That's right.
Buffalo.
So that's our fact or fiction. We'll do a pick every single day at 8:30, every single day at 3:30 as well. So listen to Dave Softy Mahler's pick or a show pick today. Probably won't be as random as Slickhawks. I would venture to say it's probably not as random.
I just was like, I wonder who Army's playing. And I looked because I know what they did against Fordham. I mean, they destroyed them on the ground.
There you go. There you go. We'll have fun with this contest all year long. Hugh, back to the Dogs a little bit before we get to Mike Holmgren at the top of the hour. Player I want to bring up that had a couple of wow plays in my mind, and ones that I just felt like if I was an NFL scout in that stadium watching that game, watching Myles Gaskin with the catch down the sidelines over a defender and then a great catch in the end zone, and scampering, in the second half as well, looking pretty good on the ground. I mean, he seemed like a guy that whose stock would at least rise in my mind in NFL scouts, just being a running back that can also make plays downfield like that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, he's kind of in that Darren Sproles category. I don't know that he's ever going to be just wildly coveted by the NFL, but it's more of a wide open game. And I think, again, Rutgers, if I'm right, that they're a little bit better in the trenches than they are on the perimeter. I think it was good for Washington to kind of find a guy that could exploit their lack of team speed. I think Coleman probably, was a physical guy that, that changeup they have with him, that might be better when you have a more physical more physical defense where he can pound it,
right?
And just try and get the tough yards. But Myles Gaskin kind of being slippery was great. He caught a wheel route. He caught a corner out, very well conceived play. You have to have good protection to let that play develop. But for him to make that catch in the end zone, that was really good. And I think that was one of the issues for Jake is that a lot of his targets, he's gotten small targets now. Chico McClatcher is 5'7". Andre Bacella is 5'10". Quentin Pounds is out there. He's 5'11". Now Dante Pettis is 6'1", and he's clearly the bell cow of that receiving group. They brought in Braden Linnaeus, and he's a monster. He's 6'5", 230, and I think having that height, it'll be interesting to see how they work that receiving core, because I thought there were signs of the receivers being too short affecting Browning. You had, McClatcher on a deep crossing route. Well, when you're going on those crossing routes, you'd much rather have the height. You saw Bocelli on a drag route down by the end zone where it was just a couple inches too high. When you're throwing over the middle or inside the numbers, a quarterback, you like to have a little bit of height. Now, John Ross was an exception. He was probably 5'10", but he was so fast that he was just in a different dynamic. So when you look at Myles Gaskin, I mean, he's just a smurf, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not easy to hit those kind of targets, and credit on those plays that Jake was able to do it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't think Myles Gaskin is going in the first or second round of drafts. I'm just saying, when you're a running back in college football and you're going to very likely break the all-time rushing record at a very prestigious university like the University of Washington, and you can go downfield and make catches like that, I mean, that's pretty special.
He'll be thought of as a third down back initially.
Yeah, no, I think so. How do you think the carries are going to be split this year, and how do you think they should be split this year between your two horse running backs?
I think they're just going to probably ride the hot hand. I mean, Myles Gaskin is the starter, but Levon Coleman has put on weight, and he's pushing 230. Looks like an NFL back. He's all gunned out. And, you saw against Arizona last year where it was Coleman who just had the right feel against that defense, and he was just taking the one cut. He wasn't as much of a dancer. I mean, you've got Myles Gaskin's more patient. He probably is a better runner when you have gap scheme, meaning you're following a lineman who's pulling, or you're following on counter plays, you're following a tight end, and you just kind of wait behind, and you have that lead blocker, and you stay in behind his wake, the wake of that lead blocker, but then you have the quickness to accelerate, just anticipatory. You accelerate right when you think that block is going to be made, but you're following a lead blocker. There's zone blocking schemes. You don't have that lead blocker in that regard. You got to just sense how the defense is flowing, make the one cut, and just go and accelerate. So it's a different skill set that they each bring. Gaskin more patient. Coleman just kind of, just grab it and go. And I think based on the schemes that are working and the defense, either one of them. I think in the end, Gaskin's going to have more carries and more yards, but I think Coleman's going to have a substantial contribution.
You spoke about Byron Murphy a little bit. How about the other freshmen? How about the other guys that were playing, both true and redshirt, that were playing their first ever game with the University of Washington? Some guys that stood out to you, either positively or negatively?
Well, you get the one kid gets beat for a touchdown, and but he
kind of tripped and stumbled over either his feet or the receiver's feet.
Experience.
He had him covered pretty good until he tripped. Looked like, right?
Yeah. He just failed to make a play on the ball, and I was kind of looking more at the release. How did he defend at the line of scrimmage? And I thought he was fine. He was okay. He got beat a little bit there, but he made up. But at his height, he's got to be able to have the ball skills in there. I think a key guy when you're talking about, now he's not a freshman, but Ben Burkervin. It's kind of a lot of good plays, a lot of
motor.
good stuff.
Good motor.
Yeah, and I think he's an emotional guy out there. But I think it's going to be good to get Azim Victor back in there.
Yeah. Miles Bryant,
he the most notable play is he took a gamble. In fact, each one of those guys took a gamble down near the red zone where they started to undercut the ball, and had they won, then they got a chance for a pick six, because Byron Murphy did the same thing over on the other side on an out route. Now, it wasn't as punitive, it didn't cost them a touchdown, but they're young guys. What I like about Coach Pete's philosophy here is that, hey, we have confidence. We'll put them in even when we're not going to wait for it to be a 50-point blowout. We're going to play these guys, and I think that projects a confidence to those guys, and then that's how you build your depth. Then when guys get drafted early in the second round, like they did a year ago, you've already got guys who have experience, so you're stepping up. So I think that's kind of a bedrock to the philosophy of Coach Pete, is make sure we're getting these young guys playing, even if we're going to take some growing pains, and it might be in a competitive situation. Second quarter, the game is still in doubt, but we're going to get these guys some reps.
I was trying to remember Coach Pete's exact words coming in, but he said something to the effect of, one unit, one part of the team that you really don't have any excuse not to be humming right away, and that's the special teams. And you get the punt return from Dante Pettis, and you get Joel Whitford. We got to give Joel Whitford some props, the Aussie who pinned them down twice inside the 2-yard line, and one of them really directly, the result directly of that punt was the Dante Pettis punt return, because they're punting from inside their end zone.
Yeah, no, that's right. No, it was a good start that way. Did we miss a field goal?
No.
We hit every.
This game
hit all
missed
the
every.
kicks.
Yeah, he made 3 for
kicks.
3. Yeah.
Okay. I watched a lot of
very
football
good.
this week.
Very good special teams across the board.
Very much so. And and just finishing up on those young guys, I think it bears mentioning on the second Byron Murphy interception. Schematically, Rutgers, they have the split end that is underneath of Murphy. He runs on a shallow cross. So in that zone coverage, now Murphy's going to free up. Now they're running receivers back into his area. The quarterback's got to be aware or throw with anticipation, but I think that there was a little bit of a scheme contribution where the Huskies, they won by scheme there. That's one where I bet you the Coach Kill, the offensive coordinator for Rutgers, I think he goes back. That's literally his name. Do you know his name?
Coach Jerry Kill.
Kill.
You talking about Byron's second interception? He almost looked like a safety there. Like, what was he? Who was he covering?
Yeah, well, he's in his zone, and so he's aligned over the receiver. If the receiver goes vertical on him, even though it's zone, it's going to look like man-to-man. If he runs a go route, it looks like Byron Murphy's got a man-to-man. If he runs an out route, it looks like Byron Murphy has a man-to-man, even a curl route. But he ran a shallow cross in towards the middle of the field, shallow crossing route at 4 or 5 yards.
Mm-hmm. So Murphy lets him go.
He gives them up to the underneath coverage.
Okay.
Now he's sitting there, and I'm saying from a scheme standpoint, I would be, if I was on the Rutgers staff, I would be in talking with Coach Kill, like, okay, when we go against zone coverage, we got to teach this, that if somebody's coming back in essence, that's freeing up Byron Murphy to be, the commentator said, almost like a safety position.
Yeah.
That's how a cornerback can get almost in a safety position, is that guy runs the shallow cross. It's the one route where he's going to free up. That's another part of, as a quarterback, for example, when you read man-to-man and they're rushing only 4 and a linebacker frees up because the running back is staying in, then a lot of times, or let's say, actually, let me rephrase it. If you rush 5 and running back blocks, the guy who's going to be covering him then frees up. So from a scheme standpoint, you got to understand, if you design a play, you say, well, if we get man-to-man, that guy who's covering the back, he becomes a lurk, and it's just like a little, what we call a robber, a guy just hanging out about 7-8 yards from the line of scrimmage, and he ends up
the quarterback's eyes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even though he's in man coverage. So in this case, I think the Huskies won by scheme, where they had somebody directed into an area where Murphy was in a position to just be kind of hanging out like a safety.
Coming up in the 9 o'clock hour, Mike Holmgren next, followed by the great debate. Final hour of the big show before Chuck and Puck on 950 KJR. Rolling into the final hour of things here before Chuckles and Puckles. At 10 o'clock, morning headlines. What's going on in the world of sports? Well, a lot has gone on in the world of sports since we last chatted on Friday morning. UCLA, we talked about it in the 6 o'clock hour, rallies from 44-10 down to beat Texas A&M 45-44. They become the first team in over a decade to overcome a 34-point deficit to win its second biggest all time. Number 1 Alabama pulls away from Florida State Saturday night for the win. Dogs pull away in the second half for a 30-14 win at Rutgers. Cougs breeze to a win. Hawks just have as busy a weekend as I can ever remember. Trading Jermaine Kearse, a 2nd and a 7th to the Jets for defensive tackle Sheldon Richardson and a 7th rounder. Patriots trading cornerback Justin Coleman to the Hawks for a 7th rounder. Hawks trading Tremaine Brock to the Vikings for a 7th rounder. They trade a 7th rounder to the Chiefs for offensive lineman Isaiah Battle. Just absolutely making like a move by the hour, the Seahawks on Friday and Saturday. And how about our plucky little Mariners there, Slickhawk? How about the plucky little M's? Sweeping away the Oakland A's. Let's sing the Rover. Holmgren on hold, listening to the Rover. I don't know if you've heard us sing before.
A sweet bitch as lucky can be.
And it's no nay now. No nay never no more. Will I play the wild lover?
No, never, no more. The bad news, the best team in the American League coming into town at what, like 30 games over 500?
Well, we'll
like
just see about that.
Who'd you say we had to face this for the next 3 days?
Nobody big, nobody special. Just Dallas Keuchel, Justin Verlander, and Lance McCullers.
Oh, good Lord.
No big deal.
Meanwhile, we're countering with Erasmo Ramirez, Ariel Miranda, and Mike Leake, if my memory serves me correct. I would say minor miracle to pull off a series win over the next 3 days, but you never know. You never know. Shall we talk to Coach here, Slickhawk? Let's do it.
Move that thing. Give yourself the field on it. Okay. Okay? Yeah. All right. Now, are you all right? Yeah. No more rocket balls, please. Oh, I was teamed up. No, I know.
Your home for the NFL and the 12th Man presents Mike Holmgren.
28 pass protection. Did you make a call? Yeah, I had to. I made a lucky call.
Powered by Geico, by Tacoma Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, by El Gaucho, by 3010, by Master Park Airport Valet Parking, by Advanced Hair, by Providence St. Joseph Health, and by Aging Options.
Once you're a coach, you're always a coach. It never leaves you.
Now, Mike Holmgren on Seattle Sports Radio 950.
Okay, let's do it. One more time.
KJR.
Coach Holmgren, all football season long at 9 o'clock. Normally he'll be in studio at this time, but since we didn't have a Seahawks game to talk about this weekend, we've got him on the phone. But Coach, happy Labor Day to you. Do you have a Holmgren family get-together coming up this evening?
Well, today's kind of quiet. We had it yesterday. Okay. So after church, all the guys came over, the grandkids. We went out, and we have a little boat, and we went out and hooked up one of those things behind the boat and just went out on the lake and had a blast. It was fun. Yesterday was the day, though.
Now, you were driving the boat. You weren't in that little thing behind the boat,
right? No, I was driving the boat.
Can you imagine Holmgren on one of those inner tubes just bouncing up and down? That'd be something.
There's room for two people in there, but not two people like me. Two people like my grandkids. Yeah.
Well, Coach, just an amazing weekend for the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, just left your head spinning. So, of all the things that they did this weekend, maybe what's the thing that's most on the forefront of your mind that was either a surprise or you applaud or what have you?
Well, I think two things. I think getting Richardson, if he can be the player that he was and a couple years ago. That's a huge addition. I was sorry to see Ataba Rubin go. We had him in Cleveland. I really liked him. He's a good guy, and I think he was a good player for the Seahawks. But so I was sorry to see him go. Kason Williams, though, that was the one that surprised me just a little bit. I think he earned a position on the football team. And the way that Pete and the Seahawks talk about competition. And regardless of who you are, when you come in, you compete, and then we're going to make the decision based on that. And that's a big selling point for them, and that's one of the reasons they're really good. But in this case, I think it didn't play out. I think they went with and kept the young draft choice, and we had talked about it last week a little bit on the air. They kept it because he was a draft choice. I mean, let's tell it like it is. And I think a good football player with really a lot of potential ahead of him is now going to play for someone else.
It sounds like when you say he earned his right, obviously if you're making the call, he'd make your team. Maybe just expand on what you see that you've liked from him where he would have satisfied you enough, Mike, and met your standards so that he's on your team, and then why? I mean, we understand the third-round aspect with Darbo, but just if there's an area where you could speculate as to Kason, why is he not Calvin Johnson? There must be some reason why they say, okay, we can live without this guy. What do you like about him? What do you think that they just don't see enough of?
Well, I think, first of all, Hugh, I didn't know you were there because this is a holiday.
Well, good morning,
You'd be out on your boat someplace. Good morning, by the way.
Yeah.
I think what I like about him is what I like about receivers. I like a guy who's a good route runner, who has good size, appears to have good hands. I don't see him as much as obviously they do, and they're evaluating those things too. And I think by all indications, as he played the preseason, and he's been with them a couple of years, they know him, that he's gotten better. I think he's gotten better. And so I like big receivers. I like big targets, big receivers. In my passing game, it was you're not always going for home runs. You're going for the catch, the first downs, those kind of things. And it was a nice fit. That's how I saw him. Now, but the decision clearly came down to whether we keep a third-round draft pick. Now, that's a whole other discussion. And, I understand it. I mean, you've invested money, and you've invested all sorts of time in picking that guy, and it's a valuable pick. And clearly, to make the decision that they did, in my opinion, that they see something in that receiver, the young receiver from Michigan, that they can build on, and they hope it will happen moving down the line. Now, it hasn't happened for us yet, but that can happen to a rookie. He gets into games and they don't throw him the ball, whatever it is. That can happen. But that surprised me just a little bit. And quite honestly, Hugh, I look at the receivers. And the receivers, Doug Baldwin clearly has stepped up to be one of the fine receivers in the league. Mm-hmm. After that, if you look at the guys that are there, you see a lot of things you like, but like with Richardson, he has not shown great durability. He's shown the ability to play football, but not great durability. Lockett's coming off an injury. The receiver position is not talked about like the offensive line, but it is, to me, now some things have to happen and prove it to me that you got the group that should be there.
Mm-hmm. Coach Holmgren joining us as he always does at this time during football season. Coach, we have another situation where we've got an angry Richard Sherman and about the Casey Williams cut. He was tweeting with our friend Hawk Blogger over the weekend, who was talking about that Casey Williams wasn't going to make the 53-man roster, and Richard Sherman says there is no explanation for this. And to the response was always compete falls on its face with this one, to which Richard Sherman replied completely. So how do you handle something like that where now you have a player that you've had to deal with in the past has again kind of confronted and flied in the face of the management?
Well, I just think, they've been down this road, and I think last year reached its peak, and I think everyone's kind of kissed and made up. And so no one should be surprised by something that Richard comes out and says. I think he speaks from the heart. He competed against Casey all the time, probably appreciated how the young man practiced. He knew him. Maybe they were friends. I don't know. But that's not a lot of people feel that way after those cuts take place. They're just not quite as vocal as Richard. And but that's, look at, and Hugh knows this better than anybody. You make friends, and when guys, I remember when I was cut years and years and years and years ago. Mm-hmm. I had guys coming up to me that I had made friends with, and we competed with each other, and they were legitimately coming over and saying sorry, good luck with down the road, and they felt bad. And so I think that's what it was, and I think this is not going to be a big deal. Richard spoke his mind like he will, and then now we move on.
Mike, I want to go back to the Sheldon Richardson discussion for a second, and you acknowledge the talent and what they're acquiring there. Your thoughts on, Sheldon Richardson now in year 5. The Seahawks give up a second-round pick. They send Jermaine Kearse as well. And now you've got 8 Pro Bowlers on that defense.
Yeah.
You still got some rather conspicuous concerns on the offensive side of the football. What about the idea, just philosophically, the club saying right now appears to be a hammer down move? Maybe it's connected with Malik McDowell and the status with him, but you go out and you get a guy right in the prime of his career to fortify that defense. What about the dynamics involved with that acquisition?
Yeah, I think a couple things pop out, Hugh, to me. I think a lot of teams, to have a fellow like Richardson who on the surface and at first blush and on paper, you go, first of all, you don't let him you don't let him leave your team through trade or anything else, contract things. You manage to figure out a way to keep him. That's the first thing. So if he's available, then you better have done your homework and make sure why, and you can live with the reasons why if there are some reasons. That's the first thing. The second thing is they are so loaded on defense, and they appear, from a fan's perspective, you look at it, you go, okay, we have these questions. Here's the team. We have questions, I think, legitimate questions about how this area of the team, the offensive line, the running backs, whatever, are going to function. We don't know that. But it seems to me that they're saying we are going to be so good on defense and we're going to shore up the defense, and this has been their philosophy, that, we don't have to score a lot of points. We don't have to have all those players, those types of players on offense. We have a Pro Bowl quarterback, an All-Pro quarterback, and we have one great receiver, Doug Baldwin, and we have some others, and we can score enough, and we can be careful with the football. But we're going to win like we've won in years past. We're going to play great defense. No one's going to score very much on us. We won't have to score a lot, but we probably will because we have a great quarterback. Mm-hmm. I think that's the thinking. At least that's how I'm reading this. Because to put all your resources on that side, not all of them, but a vast majority of the resources on that side of the ball, I think they're saying something.
Is too much made, Coach, of the whole last year of a contract thing? I mean, we talk about that all the time. And here's Sheldon Richardson. He's in the last year of a contract, which automatically means that you're going to get 25% more production and 25% more effort than you would otherwise. Is that just do us fans just make that up, or do you actually see more often than not players pick it up in the last year of a contract?
That's a tough one. I think players are aware of it. Absolutely, they're aware of it, and players coming into the league now. They've been playing football their whole life, and now it's the business side of football kind of enters into their thinking if it wasn't there before. And so now you go into a contract year, the last year, and you go, okay, if you're smart, you go, okay, this is an important year for me. But again, if you have to go into the last year of your contract, of your deal, and you're playing for that, then that's saying a little bit about how the club views you, and how and so you go, if I don't make it here, or if they're viewing me, or I'm not good enough to be here, I've got to play my heart out, and then I'll be good enough for someone else, and it'll help me down the road. I think that's how the thinking goes.
Well, Jermaine Kearse had 2 more years, still does have 2 years on his contract. He's up at around $5 million for next year, so maybe they would have had to confront some dynamics a year from now. But nonetheless, he moves on. He's a Jet. You had kind of talked about some of the concerns you have with the receiving core, but just speak specifically to your reaction about the Kearse trade.
Well, you know what, and Hugh, you and I have talked about the receivers many times, and Jermaine was, he made great plays and important plays in what's happened with the Seahawks in previous years, but his numbers weren't great. He wasn't the number one receiver, and some would argue, I listening to you at times, you would argue that he wasn't even the number 2 receiver. So. But he was dependable, I guess you could say. He was a good target. He would block. He was a good teammate. He was all those things. And so, but then you have to make decisions on money. And I think going into the last year of your deal, I think in historically, if you look at how the Seahawks have done things, that if you go into the last year of the deal, if you don't have that knockdown great year, if you don't, then probably you're not going to be coming back. Even in the last 2 years, if you have 1 year left on your deal and you don't have a knockdown great year in the second year, the year before you have the 1 year, then you're probably going to be on the market for trade or something, and that's how they operate. That's how they seem to operate.
How much does what a player has done in the past for a particular organization? You've got a long tenured player here. Jermaine Kearse has made, despite the barbs he's taken, he has made 3 or 4 of the greatest, most impactful catches in Seattle Seahawks history. He's won NFC Championship games. You could argue he won both NFC Championship games with touchdown catches.
Sure.
Would have had if Marshawn Lynch plunges it in the Super Bowl, Jermaine Kearse goes down in history as probably making the greatest catch in Super Bowl history to set up that touchdown. So how much in your past, when you have a player who's done a lot for you, how much does that weigh in your decision whether to let him go or trade him, or is it simply, hey, it's a business, we got to make this move regardless of what he's done?
I was bad at that. I'll admit it. I was not great at that because I would get attached as a coach.
Yeah.
I would remember what that player did for me and for our team, and it would stick with me. That's why you have hopefully a great relationship between the coach and general manager, and someone who can balance that off, that emotion of that, and kick it into a business type thing. That's not to say now I wouldn't argue and win those arguments sometimes, but you know what? I think you have to do ultimately what you think is best for your football team, regardless of your personal feelings for a player. And the players, I think, understand this. I believe they understand it now more than they ever have. At the same time, it was hard for me. If I thought there was something redeemable about a player, even in his later years, I mentioned Reuben today. I like Ataba Reuben. I mean, I really like the guy personally, and he's a good football player. So that would have been a hard one for me. But you know what? You have a philosophical way of dealing with players on a roster, and each club has a different way of doing that a little bit. And I think the Seahawks have a way. They've established it, and then they everyone loves everybody. Everyone, all that's good. But then when it comes right down to it, pulling the trigger and letting a guy go, if they think it's the right time, they'll do it. And regardless of how popular a player is or how if you like him or not, and that's probably a good way to do it, but it's a difficult way to do it.
Mike, I think when you have a good team, it's easy to overlook what you really like about the team and focus on the concerns because you're kind of in that, hey, what's the chance we can get to the Super Bowl? We've talked about the offensive line real just bluntly. Should it be a surprise or a concern or a disappointment for a Seahawks fan, given how the offensive line had played a year ago? You use a second-round pick. Ethan Posick comes in, and it appears he's not going to be a starter.
Yeah.
Is that too high a resource? Is there a disappointment involved when you say second-round pick, bad offensive line from a year ago? Should we expect more there, or what's your reaction to that?
I think you should expect more there. I've sung the praises, and I do it honestly about Tom Cable, and I think I've said this also, that I think at times he gets put in a spot because he's a good coach, and that the feeling is like he can take a group and mold them into what is necessary. I don't think anything in the preseason, and then I'm not even talking about Fant getting hurt. I don't think anything in the preseason has made us feel real comfortable with where that is. They're great. I like Britt. I mean, I think he's a great leader. I think he's a fine football player. But all the other positions, I think, are works in progress a little bit. And I've said this before, if you had a quarterback that was a pocket passer, then, I don't think they could go this way. I really don't. I think they'd have to look at it a little differently. But Russell moves so well, I think they have the ability to look at it a little differently. Using a high pick I assume that guy, if they're going to pick a guy in the second round, did he go in the second round? Was it?
Second, yep.
Yeah, if you're going to pick a guy in the second round, what I'm thinking is, he should be one of your starters. Given what happened last year. Mm-hmm. But so we'll see. That might still happen. He might still wind up playing a lot if someone gets nicked up. He'll have to. But I think that you're kind of saying something when you pick a guy in the first round or second round. I really believe that, and it didn't happen. So we'll see how this pans out. But it's just where you put your resources, and I think it's pretty obvious where they put their resources.
No question on the defensive side of the football. And, Coach, we're going to let you off easy. It's Labor Day. We don't want you laboring any more than you have to. But next week when you're in studio, we got you the whole hour, all right?
We're back to,
and we'll talk to you on Friday on the phone as well. You don't know anything about the Packers organization, do you? Can you give us a little insight on that on Friday?
You know what? I'll do some reading on them.
Yeah, read up
on
them.
Where are they? Are they in Milwaukee?
Close. Thanks, Coach. We'll talk to you Friday.
All right, man.
Okay.
You bet. Mike Holmgren will join us, and that'll be fun to talk Packers stories with Mike Holmgren on Friday as the Seahawks get set to take on the Green Bay Packers on Sunday afternoon. Slickhawk's got some hard-hitting debate questions for us coming up next right here on 950 KJR. All right, Slickhawk, what do you got for us?
Well, last night, Josh Rosen and the Bruins executed one of the greatest comebacks in college football history to put a cap on a perfect weekend for the Pac-12. Where does the Pac stand in terms of the other conferences in strength in 2017?
Well, that's kind of sort of a prediction. We know.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, and evaluate. I mean, it's tough to evaluate at this point. I think the Pac-12 last year certainly upped its standing a little bit. And I think with the relative weakness of the SEC this year, I think that's going to rise up all the rest of the boats, all the rest of the conferences, because right now the general perception of the SEC is there's Alabama and there's a whole lot of teams that are just good. And there's nothing else that's really challenging, at least from what I've watched and read as far as the preseason. So maybe that just on it in itself will rise the Pac-12's perception up if the SEC isn't seen as just this dominant conference like it normally is.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a halo around the SEC, and I think well-deserved. I mean, I think, year in and year out, now there may be slight aberrations, but over a period of time, the SEC is the best conference in football. At least, it's a subjective claim, but that's just my opinion. The Big Ten had a really good year last year. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin. There was a lot of good teams in the Big Ten, so we'll see. If they slip, as I mentioned, Michigan's defense was just electrifying against Florida. Harbaugh's a terrific recruiter, and since Harbaugh got there, they've had two or three of the most, soul-ripping losses come out. The Michigan State block punt, if you can remember that.
Yeah.
The Ohio State game where they had it and maybe there was a bad spot and, they could have won that. And then they had a real, kind of epic collapse against, I believe, Florida State in a bowl game. I don't know. If you look, there's about 3 losses by Harbaugh that if they win a couple of those things, not only is Harbaugh perceived in Michigan to be back, but they're right there. Maybe second to Alabama over the last few years. So we'll see what he's done. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. They were an inch from the Final Four last year.
Yeah,
literally an inch.
Michigan, because of that spot,
an inch from the Final Four.
Perfect summary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Washington struggled with Rutgers some early before pulling away late for a 16-point victory. Pretty big difference from last year's game. Was this an indication of Rutgers playing better than expected, or Washington playing not as well as expected? You can only have one.
You can only have one. Well, there were some obvious differences in my mind. One, you were 3 time zones away. Instead of being in the cozy confines, you were against a team that clearly, as Hugh mentioned earlier, had spent a lot of time getting bigger and stronger. Maybe not faster, but at least bigger and stronger over the last 12 months. So I'm going to chalk it up to an improved Rutgers team, combined with the fact that it was a road game that everybody said, well, you're going to win by 4 touchdowns. So kind of tough to get up for that, and it clearly looked to me like they weren't up for it until the game became a game, and then that Dante Pettis punt return kind of, stick the poker right on their butt and got them going.
You kind of just said both.
No, I mean,
you said improved Rutgers.
Yeah, it's improved, and you forget the road part of it as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll be contrarian. I'll go with Washington underperforming. I think Rutgers. I will say that they are better in the trenches. I still see slow team speed. I think Washington underperformed. I think Washington is significantly better, and I thought Washington lost at least a not insignificant part of the physical battle in that game on both sides of the ball. I mentioned Drew Sample. Not trying to pick on college kids, but don't dance on a safety. Lower your shoulder and drop that guy, and that play really bothered me. So I just think Washington, I expected more physicality.
Yeah.
I think that, and that doesn't mean that they're not a physical team. It just means they weren't at their standard for physicality on Friday.
No question. I think if you look back at now the 4 opening road games for Chris Peterson. The first one, now they didn't have a great team his first year, but they still had a good team. Played Hawaii at Hawaii and just looked stinky and barely got out of that one with a win. Last year they played Arizona, kind of a middle-of-the-road, barely bowl caliber team and go to overtime against them. And then they play a pretty darn good game against Boise and lose. So, I mean, they have not started the season on the road well, period, throughout the Chris Peterson era.
There's a commonality there, and maybe that's the variable. It's just road openers. Had Washington gone another route and played an Idaho State or something in Husky Stadium, I'll tell you, a game, that opening game at Colorado, at altitude, in heat, on the road, that could be a concern. You would not have wanted that to be their first road game.
Exactly. But on the flip side, let's say they were to open up this year against Auburn like they're opening up next year, maybe we would have seen a different Husky team. Maybe it would have been more jacked, more ready to go, being physical up front. It's possible that the rising tide would have lifted that boat.
Well, they also had the revenge issue, and the flip side of the revenge. Obviously, Rutgers had the revenge factor. The flip side is the indifference. The
Huskies killed them last year. They're no good
emotionally. So, anyway,
I mean, I guess
on to week 2.
I guess I'm making
you're
excuses.
Healthy.
Yeah,
you're
they're
healthy and you're 1-0. On to week 2.
I guess I'm making excuses for the Dogs, but you know what? I've seen a lot in Chris Peterson that's going to tell me this team's going to be a lot better in November than it is in September. I've seen a lot in what this team was able to do last year with all those guys back. There's nothing that happened on Saturday that changes my overall opinion negatively of this season to come.
No, and I'm only talking about Friday night.
Right.
Seahawks traded a second-round pick in Jermaine Kersway for Sheldon Richardson. With a potential passing down front four of Averill, Bennett, Richardson, and Frank Clark, has the D-line rotation finally gone back to the level it was at in 2013?
Well, isn't it better? I mean, now the depth isn't better, but that front four is better than it was in 2013, 14.
Boy, you'd think so, right? I mean, well, you had in 13, you had Red Bryant at the defensive end. You had Red Bryant.
Yep.
You had Averill and Bennett, and you had Chris Clements. So now you lose Cassius Marsh. He's out of the rotation.
Yep.
But
Rubin's out.
But you did not have star power. You just had guys inside. Now you got a dude. And there's a difference between guys and dudes. And that's kind of how the kids talk nowadays, right? So
what type of season?
My 53-year-old ass is trying to be.
What type of season are you expecting from that dude, Hugh? I mean, are you expecting, hey, this guy is going to be every bit as good as...
I don't think he has elite football character. That's why I was trying to hint to where I say I want to be careful saying what my opinion over beer would be versus saying something on the radio, and that's kind of against my standards a little. So I'm putting a big disclaimer. This could be entirely unfair and probably shouldn't say it. But I've heard enough about kind of what's, murmurings. But I feel like it's sufficient enough. The guy has played at a very high level. Yeah, his production has dropped. Been on a losing team. I think you get him in this environment. I'm gonna drink the Kool-Aid on that Sheldon Richardson is young enough and playing for money and certainly talented enough. Now you put him on a Super Bowl contender with a culture of dominance, an expectation, and the effort. And let me quickly, having been a longtime observer of the NFL, there's the difference between theory and reality. In theory, every NFL team, they play with great guts every Sunday. They only play once a week. It's not the NBA. It's not the third night of a back-to-back-to-back, all of that. Absolutely, the NFL, there's no excuse for guys, teams, collectively having a no-show.
Right.
In reality, it happens. You know it happens. If you've watched football at all, you know that teams show up flat and they just mail it in, call it what you want. And I think Seattle has been remarkable in their capacity to avoid that.
Well, how long?
For
how many
several
games,
years?
How many games in a row until the Packer game last year did they go without losing by more than 8 points?
Right. Well,
years.
Pushing
in 80 games, something like that.
I was going to say pushing 90 games. They were setting records in that, and Pete Carroll knew that too. He in a brief conversation he mentioned. I wish I could remember the stat, but he said something like, "Hey, 93 games were not within within 10 points, whatever the number was.
One score, yeah, within a score.
I'm kicking the numbers right now, but the point is that the numbers were really good, and it was important to Pete Carroll. That's your takeaway, despite the fact I'm sorry I can't remember the numbers. So, credit Seattle in that regard, and I do believe that culture is going to wear off on Sheldon Richardson if there was any problems. His productivity went from 8 sacks to 5 to 1.5. Let's get him back up, and this guy could be a terror. He's a dude.
Well, the fourth dude that the Seahawks have acquired via a trade in this Carroll Schneider era, and you got an A+ for one of them in Marshawn Lynch. You got a D- in one of them for Percy Harvin. The only reason it's not an F is because he put the Super Bowl away with a punt return or a kickoff return. So I'll give him a D- instead of an F for doing that.
He almost started off with a touchdown.
And then Jimmy Graham, B- so far with
incomplete.
With the upside of maybe becoming a B+.
I'll call it
if
incomplete.
He has a good year this year, so we'll see what Sheldon Richardson can do. We'll wrap up the debate. Final segment coming up before Chuck and Puck on 950 KJR. That's Slickhawk will fire a couple more at us, and then we'll get out of here and let Chuck and Puck take over here on a Labor Day morning.
Well, cuts came out.
Yes, they did.
No Kason Williams.
Nope.
He's with the Cleveland Browns now. With Kurtz going to New York and the flashy Williams gone, is there suddenly a concern with the Seahawks wide receiver core in terms of talent and depth?
Well, I think depth, certainly. I think talent-wise, you've got arguably a top 10 receiver in the NFL in Doug Baldwin. I mean, certainly his numbers would indicate he's a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL.
I think he's the best slot receiver in the league.
I think you have a guy in Tyler Lockett that has the potential to be a really solid number 2 guy. But then after that, like Coach Holmgren talked about, like you've talked about, the uncertainties in Paul Richardson's game and how many games is Paul. I mean, can we really expect Paul Richardson to play 16 games? Can we expect Paul Richardson to play 10 games this year?
Yeah.
Well, if the answer to that is no, then you're dipping in a little bit because you only have 5 receivers on the team.
Well, it's we've been in here 4 hours, and I knew I'd have to comment on this at some point. And so I want to quickly just say there's a personal side, which Jermaine is a local kid. I want the best for him. I'm not dancing on his grave. I'm not, I hope he goes to New York and there's a situation that allows him to thrive. So best to Husky and Tacoma product, Jermaine Kearse. There's the football analyze side. I put in quotations. As I'm asked to analyze here, I've given you my thoughts for him as a player only, not the person, just the player only. So I am totally consistent in my belief that if you put Tanner McAvoy on the field and he ran 500 plays, you're going to get more out of Tanner McAvoy than you would have out of Kearse. So I'm not concerned about Kearse leaving whatsoever. In fact, I think they're better because Kearse is gone.
Okay.
That doesn't mean I don't have concerns about Paul Richardson. Everything that people have said about Richardson and the concerns, I need to see more from that guy, and particularly since he's a split end. So he's got to get going. I'm concerned about Tyler Lockett's health and how is he going to be both physically and mentally, because that was a pretty catastrophic injury, Yeah. So in my mind, you got Baldwin, and then you've got a bunch of other guys that have to prove themselves. And even if they had Kearse, I would be feeling just as concerned, if not more concerned. I think actually taking out Kearse and allowing some other young guy to thrive in that position is better for the club. So I'm exactly where I've always been in that regard, but doesn't mean I don't have concern about the wide receiver core. I think there's ample cause for concern.
By the way, Paul Richardson has had a 3-year career. 2 of those 3 years, he played 15 games out of the 16
Is that right?
in the regular season.
Played, yeah, but how many?
Probably 10 snaps a game. You got less chance to get injured if you're only out there 10 plays a game.
No, I understand. I'm just saying he's been available.
Right, but he's going to be relied on to be on the how many snaps, a healthy Paul Richardson, how many snaps does he get on the field on average?
He's going to quintuple his snaps.
40, 50 snaps.
Oh, now? Per game?
Yeah.
At least.
As the third wide receiver?
I mean, if you figure you got 75 plays in a game, yeah.
50 snaps.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
Doing
going to have to
three wides.
he's going to have to go from 10 or 12 to 50.
Oh, 5 times the chances for him to go down. Yikes.
Interesting process happened over the weekend. I don't know if everybody caught it, but when the cut list originally came out, Pierre Desir and Kason Williams were listed as waived injured.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after, Desir's agent put out on Twitter that Desir was in fact not injured. He was 100% healthy and ready to play. Then the Seahawks PR Twitter put out that they had made a mistake with Williams and Desir and it had simply been waived. Is this a simple goof, or the Seahawks trying to fudge things a little bit to try and get Williams and Desir through the waivers process?
Little gamesmanship, Hugh?
Oh,
I mean,
boy.
all teams are going to do their due diligence on that, though, right? I mean, let's just say for a second, and I'm not making any accusations here, let's just say that the Seahawks were trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the other 31 teams.
Do a little sneaky.
I mean, what's the first thing a GM's going to do? He's going to call the Hawks. He's going to call the agent. He's going to do his due diligence, and he's not just going to take waived / injured for its word and just say, well, we're not going to pick him up now because it looks like he's hurt.
Yeah. I don't want to be naive. I don't want to be cynical. I guess give people the benefit of the doubt. A simple oversight could be a simple oversight. Could be something sinister. I don't know. I'll take them for their word.
You say sinister. I see like John Schneider or Pete Carroll with long, thin mustaches that they're curling at the end. And Dudley Do-Right coming along to like save the NFL, who they've strapped down to a train track.
Is sinister the wrong word? I guess sinister would be, I'm trying to carry it out.
That's great. That's great.
Snidely whiplash. That's Pete Carroll.
And you know what? I think that's the image we should leave with. John Schneider and Pete Carroll with little handlebar mustaches tying the poor lady to the tracks, waiting for Dudley Do-Right. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks to Hugh Breedlove Millen. Thanks to Slick Hawk, Chuck and Puck coming up next.